Absolutely.
All 7 trustees present. We're ready to start. We'll begin with the order of the canvassing.
We received the official results today, and the results are as follow. This was for a trustee at large position, with the 2 largest vote getters receiving the position. So we have John W. McLaughlin at 976 votes, Ann Halsey at 1,073 votes, and Mr. James McCutcheon at 230 votes, proclaiming John W. McLaughlin and Ann Halsey the winners.
We need a motion to accept. Ms. Hanson?
I move that we approve the order.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Okay,
Motion
and we'll have the
carries.
swearing in at the regular board meeting on Monday. Also, in your next in your packet is a travel report, and so wow, I feel like I'm like really echoing. I just wanted to bring this to y'all's attention that in the past, I think what Georgiana has done is when everybody has traveled and if they started running short in their budget, she just would transfer from another trustee to the other. And so in order to be more clear and transparent to all the board members, she just wanted everyone to know where you're at. And I know that some of y'all are going to be doing some summer travel in June. And so did you want to continue that practice of transferring to one another or bringing it to the board so that y'all all look at it as a total group?
Open for discussion.
I think the board should know who's traveling.
I didn't know that was our process. I thought the board had to approve any additional funds, because I know a couple of years ago.
My understanding.
A couple of years ago, Ann wanted to do some traveling, and we were told that was the process.
The conversation came up when we started talking about summer leadership, because I know I had said that I would trade going to the national conference for SLI, and then I was told that at the end of this month we end the credits that we accumulate, and then June 1st we start again. That's what I was told. Ms. Costilla, you have a comment?
I was just going to say that my understanding, and maybe I misunderstood also, that what Ms. Viavanda made reference to, that we would, whatever was in somebody else's, I don't recall it coming back to the board to approve for additional, because it's not additional sums. It's money being used within
One item.
from one to the other. That's what I understood. Now, if it was going to be additional money that we needed to use from fund balance, then we needed to bring back. That was my understanding. Is that correct, Mr. Carolina?
Yeah, I'm looking at Denise, so she's shaking her head yes, so,
Right?
yes.
If you're gonna just add from one to the other one, it's okay, but it's only if it's gonna be beyond what we already have allotted for the board, then we need to bring it back to the board for approval.
So do you have a total? Thank you, Ms. Costilla. Do you have a total, how much we have in the budgets remaining when you put everybody's together?
Well, I can add that up for you real quick. I was just trying to show you each individual trustee itself. There's a balance, so it tells you on the bottom. So if you looked at each individual trustee, you see how much money that you have left in your travel budget. I was under the understanding y'all had another one coming up in June. Some of you may be short, some of you may be have additional money, and I think it was just to bring forth to y'all for discussion on how, did you want it to be brought back for approval to borrow from one another, or it was just to go ahead and automatically do it?
So, you were saying that our credits end in June. That's not necessarily true.
They changed it.
They changed it.
But when does that go into effect? Because we get a December report. That was for the year long of this past year, right?
See, and that was,
It's reported in December or January?
April we moved it, I think, too.
No, it's not April.
Yeah, because it had to move to the period before the election.
That's the way the state legislature changed it, so that board hours had to be reported before the forthcoming election.
The election, so now, but when does that take effect?
Right, and
Because
some of the credits are 2-year credits, so.
reported in December, didn't we? When does that
This is the
annual
first time I've
report
seen
come
it.
out where we have our cumulative credit hours?
It is 90.
They used to do it in excuse me, Ms. Cantu. They used to do it in December, I think back then, but I think now they're saying
It's
that.
moved over, something
Yeah.
about being reported right before election or around the time that election's taking
For
place.
elections.
Well, we didn't have to do it this year, because we reported in December.
We were supposed to report it in April. It wasn't put on the agenda, so
Oh,
that's, it's
okay.
gonna be on,
From now on, it's gonna be on the agenda in April.
but we should all be fine because we get 6 hours for the 1566 training and team building in
Yeah.
June. that
So
we
we'll be
scheduled.
okay. So it's whether or not we have enough, if anybody feels like they have to go,
Between everyone, there's about $9,500 left.
9,500?
Yes.
And there's another piece of miscommunication, because were we supposed to choose whether we wanted to go to national or go to SLI?
That was just a personal comment I made, that I would be willing to give up my money from SLI to move it into going to national, because I just thought it would be good to go to a national conference since it was so close by.
Well, I
It's a
felt like
personal choice.
I felt that way too, but I don't know that I wanted to give up SLI.
SLI. And we
I
can
thought it
still
was-
go, we've got money to go.
Not that, I'm sorry, not that I was giving up anything, I just thought
That it was here and we would go.
important. But I also think SLI is important, I've been to it ever since I was on the board, so.
SLI is good, yeah.
But
Ms. Holmes?
that's up to the board, whatever you all decide is fine with me.
Oh.
She had a raise.
I'll limit
So
my
did-
travel, since I'm the one that's over.
You,
But I-
you
but I-
don't owe, you just spent more.
I am, well, I did go to Dallas and nobody else went.
That's right.
And yet the credits were over by everybody else. I mean, well, some people, and I attended everything I could in Dallas.
And I know you and I attended every session.
No, I
on
was
the
the
national.
only one that went because I was the delegate.
Yeah.
I was the only one that
And
went.
you had that
in
obligation
Dece-
to represent us.
In September or October, whenever it was in the fall. And yet, well, anyway, that's beyond the point. But anyway, what I'm concerned now is, yeah, I'm already over, and so this budget goes through June?
Yes, July 1st. So this goes through June 30th. So July 1st, you start all over again.
Oh, goodness.
But
I believe
as a
you have a
group,
conference.
We still have
We
money
still
left
have
over.
money.
Yes.
As a group, we have money.
As a
And
group,
that's
you still have
anticipated.
money left until, you have about $9,500 left until June 30th.
So when Georgianne called to see if we wanted to go to SLI, if we were going so she could get a room, I didn't even respond because, not that I knew that I was over, but I had already gone and I had heard the comment about if we go to the national, that we couldn't go to SLI. But anyway, that was just.
And she can still cancel us. I mean, I think what Georgianne was trying to do was reserve
sure we had a
rooms,
room.
and those can be canceled up until a certain date.
That's not what I was.
Okay.
Anyway.
Mr. Redondo?
it's
Yeah,
whatever.
thank you, Ms. Cantu. I guess to respond to the original question of what was like the preference as an individual trustee, first, I'd like to see a policy in place that I guess supports the current practice, which is the entire board has a sum of money, and if someone doesn't use their money, then we kind of borrow from, if that's what the board wants to continue doing. So I'd like to see a policy that kind of supports that process. The second is keeping in mind that this board did vote and designate Mrs. Villalpando to be our delegate at TASB in Dallas. I think whoever that representative is on the board should have additional monies, because that is an additional obligation. So I understand right now, you know, Mrs. Villalpando technically on paper is over, but she also went to a conference that we asked her to go to on behalf of the board. So I think on paper, it shouldn't reflect that she's, or whoever that delegate is in the future is at a negative balance. So when that policy comes back, I'd also like to see where if money is allocated per trustee, then additional monies are allocated to that TASB delegate so that they can go to that delegate assembly in Dallas or Houston or San Antonio or wherever that might be. And then the third thing, I don't have intentions of going to SLI, but if my colleagues want to go, then I'm fine approving additional monies at our May board meeting for whoever that might be. I don't want to know who it is. It's not about who's going or who's not going. If the colleagues want to go, then I'm comfortable having a budget amendment come back in May to allow.
Or wouldn't need a
like-
budget amendment.
We
Well,
don't
I mean,
need-
whatever that might be, because I know we're talking about the money and 9,500, so whatever needs to take place, if some people want to go, then I'm comfortable doing that as well.
Thank you. Ms. Halsey?
Yeah, it was certainly my understanding that I had a certain allotment, and if and when I used up the allotment, then I would need to come back and request board approval for an additional allotment. And it seems like going forward, that would be the most equitable, transparent process by which, if I have used up all of my allotment at this point, but want to do something in addition, to come back and request that. And the same that if I have used up my allotment and then it just go, and then automatically get money out of a pool, that seems like it could unfairly penalize somebody, say Mr. Arredondo, who came back in 6 months and hadn't used up his, and then an opportunity came up, and he was then the one who was short and had to come back and request the funds. So that seems difficult, and I'm certainly happy to approve funds for colleagues to attend, and I think that, allotting additional money for attending conferences that we intend to send delegates to is totally appropriate, but it just seems we should be as transparent as possible in the process, to me.
Ms. Costilla?
I think everybody, I'd like to think that everybody on this dais is for transparency. I think that what we need to remember is that we are a group, and as a group, we are allotted monies to go to conferences. Whether I go to none, go to one, or not, it's a group as a whole, and I think I'd like to see us work together rather than, oh, I ran out of money, Margie ran out of money, but I still want to do this, and so now I might have to take some of Kathy's money or whatever. Well, I think that we're beyond that. I think that we're adults and that we respectfully know, and we have a certain amount of money. I myself, I had told Georgiana in response to the email that I would go if we had money, and I prefer, in regards to the two choices regarding state, that I see the one in September and the one in SLI as things that we're going to be talking about in Texas. Texas only. The national one did not focus on Texas solely. But so I prefer to go to the SLI rather than the one in later in the fall. And that's what I told her. I said, if there's money, fine. If there isn't, that's fine. And that's the way I presented it to her. So whether there is or not is, it's irrelevant. I would like to go to state conferences. I think that's important that we go to state conferences and get updates on what's going on. But once again, I think that we need to focus on us as a group. If we're going to be cohesive and working together, let's work together.
Absolutely. Ms. Hanson?
I agree with Ms. Halsey. I'd like to see it, the policy, so that we see transparency, and if people want, I'm not saying we can't attend, but I think we need to make sure it's transparent. I would also like a separate allotment, not assigned to any certain person, to be used for whoever we send as delegates. I think that's important, so it doesn't, come out of whoever goes, out of their allotment. It's extra, because we as a board are asking that person to do this based on our needs.
Mr. Goffin, did you have something?
Are we all weighing in?
Huh?
I don't know, in the immediate, if just half of mine can go to Ms. Villapando, that would clear up this year and make sure she could attend SLI if she wanted to. I'm not gonna spend all that, so. At long term, I think providing the report probably useful, but I just wouldn't want, I see merit in both sides, and it doesn't really matter to me. So.
I have a question.
Mr. Arredondo?
Thank you. So this spreadsheet, I understand, for understanding what the budget looks like, but is it designated in policy that we're each allotted $3,055? Or is
I
that
don't
just
think
kind of,
so.
we take the pool of money and divide it by the 7 of us.
Yeah, I think it's just been something that's been set based on what y'all have been standardly doing.
So-
And so that's why, because some years you, depending on where y'all are traveling to, where the conferences are, some years are more than others. So that takes into play. So that's why I think it's been a standard budget. And what she's done in the past is if you've exceeded that, she just moves it around so that,
Gotcha. But so,
based on, because it varies from year to year.
so in the short term, to like alleviate the who has money, who doesn't have money, who hasn't used their money, is after any type of school board travel, conference, session, what have you, we get a report on like the expenditures pulled from that travel account. Does that make sense? Like, instead of saying that I have $3,055, if I go to 2 conferences and whenever we get this annual report, I just see the money that I've spent on travel for the year in comparison to my colleagues. Because then it frees up the, like, who has spent their money, who hasn't spent their money. Am I taking Ms. Halsey's money? Like Ms. Castillo said, we're all withdrawing from this travel account. And if at the end of the year, it shows that I've spent $15,000 in travel, then clearly, like, that's a conversation that the residents of District 1 and the board can have at, I guess, that point in time, but I highly doubt anyone I'm currently serving with would travel to that extent. I understand that it's an issue now that we kind of have arbitrarily in the past divided this money up by each trustee. But if we just look at it as like a school board travel account, then it removes the issue of who has spent their allotment or who hasn't, because technically it's not an allotment, it's just a way that we've kind of looked at the account for the last several years.
And I asked Karen to put this together for
Yeah.
us, only because we're looking at decisions on SLI, and the budget year ends at the end of June, and we still have one more conference that falls in that budget year. Thank you for the report. Anybody else?
What happens if it's all gone and somebody wants to go somewhere?
You would make a budget amendment.
We'll come to the board.
We just come back and make a budget amendment. We make budget amendments all the time.
Let me just add that I don't recall Kathy ever making a budget amendment for our travel. I really, really don't recall that we ever came back. Have we made, Carol, oh, there you are. It's, no, I don't think so. I think it's just been.
It's the attorney fees that we're not good with. Okay. Yes.
I forgot what
That's okay.
At the beginning, we talked about a policy. Are we gonna develop that travel? Kind of have a guidance or something, no?
I had not planned on it.
Oh,
I just
okay.
wanted to see, if we had money, if anybody wanted to go to the SLI, we could still go to SLI, or whoever wants to go to SLI.
Just budget the money. If we need something, we'll deal with it. Okay.
I don't
well,
think it's something we need to put into a policy.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we ever go over or something, we can deal with it, but as long as we've always been within the budget,
Yeah.
at least that's a committee I would not wanna be on that.
Me neither. I don't want to serve on that
And I'd
policy.
assume if I go to like, if I request staff to get me a booking to like a school board conference in the Caribbean, there'd be
In
some
Hawaii?
issues before that became a problem
deny
up
it.
here, so,
And we will say, I don't think so.
you know.
Okay, we're
trust
ready
them.
to go on. Everybody got their say? That was just for discussion purposes. We're ready for agenda prep. We can look at our agenda for next Monday's meeting.
Madam President and members of the board, good evening, and thank you. Just a couple of things before we get started with agenda prep. So there's a memo that's on the dais that's from me, that's regarding our recent STAR scores, 4th and 8th grade, first round. So again, like we did last year, it's just an overview. This one is based on cohort data from 4th to 5th graders, so they had to have been with us for 2 years. Moving into 5th and 8th grade, broken down by demographics, by subpopulations, since that's one of our core commitments. Reading from left to right, it's all schools, and you have the individual school compared to the district per level, and then the state averages for reading and math. Second, there is a handout that we were also asked for current seventh graders, which is our Gear Up, which is just a one-pager. Again, broken down by category, by demographic, just for your information. I will move on to the agenda. Item 5 of the agenda will have a discussion in closed session regarding Bonham. Ms. Griffith?
We have met with our city attorney, Michelle Bartlett, and also with the civil engineer that is working on the transportation. Remember, we asked him to take a holistic approach. We have some results from that last rain, having the detention ponds up there and then having the culverts. So we're gonna bring that to you and then also bring you the second phase of what drainage issues that we feel like we need to address to complete this. Flooding situation. Sorry, I didn't know what the word is to say. And we'll go over it in detail in executive session.
Item numbers, I'm sorry?
That's item 5.
Oh, 5A.
And
Okay.
yes, 5A and 6A.
Since you're paying them, by the hour, I figured you'd want to get that over with, so you're not paying them for the whole
Yeah,
meeting.
for sure. They can call in. I'd be fine with that too.
No, pay mileage.
Still, if you have them on standby, you still have to pay for it, whether they call in or.
Contract.
Lawyers.
Item 7, superintendent's report will be done probably by Mr. Fernandez. As some of you are aware, Ms. Ruiz Mills and myself will be with the mayor and with the chamber in Greenville, South Carolina for their inter-city visit, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
For their what?
Inter-city visit, visiting some elementaries, Clemson University. It's a partnership, so we are going with Ms. Owens and our CTE director, because we'll be visiting some STEM-related areas. Ms. Griffith will be on the dais, so Mr. Fernandez will present. And we have a lot for superintendent's report. A lot of kids doing a lot of great things. Number 8, just public forum. Number 9, consider approval of name for new elementary school. So, Mr. Watson, Mr. Fernandez will be here, and we will have, I'll send you an update between today and the board meeting, just to give you a timeline of the various meetings that took place, so that you can have that while you discuss the approval of the new name for the new elementary school. Item 10, academic update. Ms. Ruiz Mills, if you attached, there's a couple papers here that are in front of you.
Just talk about the year in review, talk about the fitnessgram testing and just of the different initiatives that took place under the SHAC this year. What you have in front of you is voting membership. The applications are supposed to go live tomorrow at 4:30. So we went ahead and put a copy of the application for you so you could review it. And then if you would like to request any revisions, if you can just let Mr. Fernandez know by 4:30 tomorrow, because he is gonna put it on the website. Also, we included the names of the people that are currently serving on the SHAC for the next 2 years. They're either a community parent, a grandparent, or a parent or a student. And then we included the bylaws again, because I wasn't certain if we had given you the clean copy. We had given you a revised copy that still had the markings, so we included the bylaws for you. Okay.
President,
Yes.
we're going to entertain additional new members for new 2-year terms at the, well, at what point?
So this expires in 2019. As of right now, we have 7 openings, so we could appoint up to 7 more people.
But they would serve just the 1 year remaining?
They would do the 1 year, and then we'll start staggering the years, so this way we have new representation every year.
I think there was some concern among my colleagues, I think, like I don't remember, with regard to vetting or what we should do with applicants, and I feel like we haven't changed anything. So before we take applications, I think it would be fair to let applicants know exactly what we're going to do in that regard. Does someone have input?
Yeah, I have a
Ms. Costilla?
Vetting by the board?
Not by the board before it comes to us, I think was the idea.
So by administration then, by them, not us?
They're gonna take the applications in. I would imagine they'd go over them before they bring them to us.
Okay. But we're not gonna be sitting here reviewing applications?
No.
Okay. I was gonna be very uncomfortable with that.
No, I don't want to do that, but
Oh, okay.
I think there was some concern that the process that we went through last time was not thorough enough. And so it would seem like, I mean, I'm fine for whatever change of process, but it should be probably written so that, or at least we can give them guidance so that it actually gets done the way that we collectively, the 7 of us, expect. I don't think we've ever really had that conversation. I don't know if that's something we do with this agenda item or if that, I really don't know how to deal with it. I just don't think we've done anything.
Under Article 4 in membership, it just tells really who or what kind of background we expect in terms of parents or community people, grandparents. Are you wanting more than that, Mr. McLaughlin?
I was trying to be sensitive to colleagues' concerns more than expressing my own. I just thought after we had the big conversation about inadequate or potentially inadequate vetting, that before we had new members, we would do something differently. I don't want to walk into that same situation again.
I wouldn't want to do it again either.
Ms. Cantu.
Yes.
So it was I had concerns about the process that we followed last time, and it was my understanding that the SHAC would be reviewing the membership process this year and would come back to us with a recommendation. As far as I see, though, the recommendation is just to continue the process as has been, which is basically anybody can apply and everybody's appointed.
So we want to keep up to the 30, I need to go back and look, up to the 30 total members. And that was the board meeting when Mr. Rios presented that we had given you the markouts.
Right.
And they had gone through this entire policy. If you want it to be set almost like a rubric form, then we're going to need to get that subcommittee together again to redefine what's in their policy for membership.
Right, I mean, I'm uncomfortable with the process that we followed because it felt to me like there was no process, that it was just anybody could apply, and once we filled the numbers, those were the people that were appointed to the committee, unlike every other committee that this board appoints, where the board members make individual appointments. So I would be comfortable with board members making appointments. I would be comfortable with doing a round robin like the city does, where the commissioners or the appointments for commissions go through and somebody makes a nomination and that person has to get X amount of nominations and it continues on that way until the commission is filled. I maintain a great level of discomfort with this process, but that's my opinion, so.
Ms. Hanson?
My concern is, should we have 40 people apply? How do we, narrow it down?
So because there are only 7 spots, what they were planning on doing is taking those 7 names and developing a rubric. What we can do is we can get the subcommittee back together again and we can determine what are we looking for within those 7 people that we're willing to fill. We can also ask the subcommittee, we can also go and do what Ms. Halsey just recommended, where each board member can recommend one individual. And then that way, we have a really good blend and mixture of the community in there. So we can do that. We just need to take it back to the subcommittee.
Mr. Redondo?
Yeah, I just want to echo, one, I'd like to thank Mr. McLaughlin for bringing it up, and then I'd like to echo Ms. Halsey's sentiment. And this, I guess, speaks to more of the board's current practices of appointing representatives to any standing committee. I know when Mr. Watson brings us policy changes, we typically have like a first reading, And then, you know, the board is allowed to review that policy and, you know, what's being proposed and then take action at a following meeting. I guess at the very least, if Mr. McLaughlin is looking for suggestions from the dais of what we could do to possibly prevent what happened last year from happening again, is that whatever those applicants are, whoever they might be, that the board has brought those names, and if for whatever reason someone applying or on that list has some issues or concerns, not to say that I'm gonna spend my time looking into them, but if it's brought to any of my colleagues' attention or my own, then we can obviously have that conversation or hopefully deal with it before it comes a vote for or against type situation. The second thing, and I know we've done it with pond oversight, the school naming, so on and so forth, I'd like to see if we could put that in policy as well, if those appointment processes are also on a kind of a two-step, where if I want to appoint, you know, Mr. Van Oderkirky to the school naming committee, then I bring that to the board at the April meeting, and then everyone knows who my appointment is, and then the entire board approves that entire slate of 7 at the following meeting, rather than, I think we give some committees, like, for instance, I was able to say, like, unilaterally who I want representing me or my community or my district on a school naming committee, but when it comes to the School Health Advisory Council, it's kind of this different process, and it's more administrative and so on and so forth. So I'd like to see all those appointment processes be the same process, whatever that might be. So after that whole rambling rant, the last thing is I'd like to start seeing, and I don't know if there's support for my colleagues to do this, when it comes to bond oversight, school health advisory, school naming, that we start having a youth representative. I think that's something that we haven't had a conversation about, at least since I've been on the board, is, you know, we make these decisions unilaterally as elected officials or as policymakers, but I think we're leaving some people out from sitting at the table having those conversations with us. So all that to say, I'd like to see a policy come back and us kind of streamline those processes, or they be the same process moving forward. And at the very least, when it comes to vetting or addressing what happened last year, is if it can be like a 2-reading process, then hopefully that alleviates any potential concerns or issues.
I'm sorry, didn't we work on a local policy for Shack, or was it still a policy? There was a local policy.
That wasn't to the membership process. No, I don't think it had to do with appointing to the membership.
No, so this is good, because this doesn't have to go live, it's just the standard time, so we can work on it, and then even if if we accept applications, say in August, and then we name them in September, we're still within a time frame. So
Just so that I understand what the board is asking for, you want to have the same process for you appointing board members as administration appointing or bringing names from committees.
Well, I
So
mean,
for instance, like for the school naming, there might have been somebody, I'm not saying there might have been somebody that the board appointed who has made controversial statements in the community, let's just say, for example. So you want a process that's similar, consistent across the board, where you would look at those potential applicants, those board appointees?
As an individual trustee, I think at least in my perspective, I think it'd be nice to have a process of appointing individuals in our community to serve in some capacity, making recommendations to the board or the district or the administration to be the same. Because if somebody asked me, well, why is the Shack appointment process different than the bond oversight, different than the school naming? I would say, I don't know. It's just how we've done things. And I don't know if that's a quality answer, at least as an individual trustee. If that's kind of the direction of the board, then that's fine. If there's no interest to kind of at least establish why there's differences or why one board is appointed different than the other. But again, that's just my individual perspective.
That helps.
I think it's at least from where I am, okay that it is a little different, because this isn't a direct subcommittee. The naming committee was just something we created, and then we staffed, and we set our rules for how we staff it. But CHAC is really a piece of the district. It's something the district's required to do. It's not the same level of subcommittee as naming, and applicants who have an interest, parents and others, get an opportunity to fill out an application. They don't have to come through, be appointed by a trustee, so in essence have to be in relationship with one of the 7 of us. They can just be a parent out there who really cares about that issue and the stuff that the CHAC does. I like that openness. I just think maybe there's got to be maybe a 2-step process where we see those names and then approve those names, so that it doesn't turn into, I mean, I don't want to be in a position as a board of, unless it's something very unique, of looking to remove someone once appointed. But I think that we forced ourselves into that corner last time, by my observation, in the way it kind of got jammed all together, like real quick, long list, you know, not an opportunity for, you know, any sort of individualized consideration. So still don't think I've given you any answer, but I do, I guess, disagree just a bit with Mr. Arredondo about it having to be the same process, but I understand the idea of wanting to put kind of a speed bump between when we learn names and when we accept names.
Ms. Hanson?
I feel the same way. I think bond oversight, naming committee are short-term board committees that we develop.
Long-term.
School district-wide committees, I think, are totally different and need to have a different process. I don't want to take 2 board meetings to approve somebody to be on the school naming committee or the bond oversight committee. I should be able to give you somebody and trust that I'm not going to give you somebody that's inappropriate as a board. I mean, I think that's too cumbersome. Now, a school district-wide committee is totally different, one that serves for the whole year and represents the whole school district. I think that should have a different process.
Follow-up, Ms. Cantu, just to kind of clarify, I guess. So, again, Ms. Halsey made the comment, and I'll just kind of elaborate on at least my individual perspective. So, you know, I think a number of us on the dais have served in some capacity on a board or commission within the city of San Marcos, and all of those are applicant-based, whether it's planning and zoning or the cemetery commission that decides how much the plots are going to be. But in that instance, you know, when we do school naming or we do the bond oversight, that was essentially us asking friends, colleagues, coworkers, so on and so forth. And so, you know, our last core commitment is community engagement. And I think if there was a mechanism or a process in which school naming, bond oversight, any type of board-appointed commission or committee is open to everyone, it shouldn't just be, you know, Miguel's comadres that he considers for the school naming committee or the bond oversight committee. And essentially that's what the process has been. It's, I go talk to, you know, a builder that I know locally and ask, you know, Ryan Thomason, do you want to serve on bond oversight? But that's only because I know Ryan Thomason. You know, that leaves out so many other people because it's up to me to find folks. But if, you know, through the communications office, we said the school board is appointing representatives to the bond oversight committee. Are you interested? Here's the application process. It's not to say that you're going to be appointed, but at least here's an opportunity for people to raise their hand and say that they want to serve, versus I go out into my community and just kind of haphazardly ask folks, or we ask friends or relatives or campaign supporters or what have you, because typically that's what's been the practice, is we ask people that we know. And you know, I'm sorry, but I highly doubt that all of us know all 50,000 SMCISD residents, so we're asking our little small cadre of folks to serve on these very important committees. So
That's how it works. Ms. Garcia, did you have
No,
your hand up?
she had it first. I
Halsey?
came after.
I don't think that the appointment process needs to be the same for all the committees. I think the different committees do serve different purposes, but I do think that for a district-wide committee that does develop policy that works all year, there should be a better defined process for those appointments. So maybe if it came back, if it was that there was a membership subcommittee within CHAC, and they cultivated interested qualified people to participate, and they had a training before or an orientation prior to the application process, so that people who had a serious interest in participating could do so. I'm certainly open to having it a wide, broad, diverse application pool. But I think if we just completely open it up and say, okay, we'll take the first 27, which is sort of how I see this actually plays out, we don't run background checks on those individuals, so we are really opening up the floodgates, to anybody. And that's not to say that you have to cultivate a personal individual relationship with me, but I would like to know that all of the people that I am responsible for appointing have a serious vested interest in the issue at hand. So I do think that the commission model might be something that we consider. I don't think it's a bad thing to have somebody who's interested in being on this important committee to approach Trustee McLaughlin and say, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm interested in this committee, this is why. I think that's a good thing. That creates opportunities and that parental and community engagement part that we're looking for. So that seems like a positive.
Ms. Costillo?
I understand that all entities have their own operational modes, and, I've heard some people tell me, something good about the city, how they operate, something good about the county, how they operate. And it's good to hear things like, well, yeah, can you maybe do something like this? Well, we all have our ways of operation, and we're gonna have to come to some agreement as to those. On the other hand, I think that we also need to understand the parameters of our authority over those that involve either our administration or both together. And if there's a fine line, then we need to make sure that we are participating, contributing to whatever that fine line is. But just because somebody does something or whatever, does it something or whatever, I don't agree. I do agree with some things of what Ms. Halsey just indicated about, if this committee is going to be operating on a year-long basis, maybe we should have some guidelines in that respect. But I think we need to find out what are our parameters as far as when it comes to, for instance, naming a committee for naming a school, serving on the Overbond committee. I think those are some things that we know that fall in the parameter of the board. But I think it's important that we understand that and not be overstepping over administration if we don't have to overstep. Not just so much that we don't have to, but let's try to be conscious of that. There are some things that we can put into motion. I have no problem with that. But when it comes to some things, just because somebody else does it, I think we need to just review what we got and determine on our own whether we want to do that or not. That's all I'm saying.
I guess just as a final comment statement, so like the only thing that I heard, at least as an individual trustee agreement on, is kind of the two-step for the shack, is seeing who the applicants are, giving us the month to do with whatever we want with those names, and then approving it at a later date, which I'm fine with. And I guess I'll submit this to Georgianne in the morning or what have you, but an agenda item, but I'd like to see, I guess, staff craft the policy for it, is that any board appointed by any committee that's board appointed or board approved has some type of associated common application process that is open to the public, and that those applications are brought to us, whether it's bond oversight, school naming, school health advisory council, what have you. Now, if that policy implementation fails to receive a majority support from the board, then that's so on and so forth. And that's not even to say that if you apply for a committee or a commission, you're going to be appointed. It just gives, there's now a venue for people to be engaged in the school district. It doesn't say that we have to put them in that position, but at least it creates a mechanism allowing them to say they want to volunteer and serve.
Ms. Halsey?
I really would be interested in seeing the committee come back with a rubric for not just if we get more than 12 applications, but a rubric for evaluating every application to ensure that there's some criteria. At the minimum, I would like to see that. But.
I'll echo Ms. Halsey's comment, and if possible if there was a committee or some type of policy already in place with the School Health Advisory Council, even if they brought us a recommended slate of appointments after they do with what have you with them. I mean, I remember we kind of appointed a lot of people last year, so it's a very diverse group with, I think, very diverse perspectives in some instances. And so I think the School Health Advisory Council is qualified and capable of making a recommendation to us of who could serve. Not to say that we take the recommendation, but makes another opportunity for people to be engaged.
Ms. Hanson?
Yeah, my main concern was that if we have 40 people apply, you know, how do we narrow that down? And I don't want it to be just by date, you know, I want it to be another rubric of some kind that we go through. Because I look at the people, I mean, the places they represent, and there's a lot of schools that are underrepresented. And you know, we could assist in bringing in more people or something like that, so we could have a better representation.
So can we do
Ms.
the rubric?
Villapondo, did you have another comment?
Well, I'd just like to add that I just want to talk about the shack, because it's very specific what they have to do, how many people they have to have, the percentages of their representation. And we already have some, so we're only going to be looking at filling in, is that correct, for the next, whatever that number is. And the other thing is, their first meeting is in September, and last year we ran out of time because we had all the different issues with who was going to be on the committee and all that. So they, I know there was a lot of scrambling having to go on. So all I'd like to see is something that we could follow, some kind of schedule. And since we have so many requests from the board, maybe that means that we need to add a little extra time to how many times we have to meet in order to meet, for them to be able to get a September meeting, for all the people that we're talking about to be able to be appointed, to be whatever the rubric is, and be ready to go for that September meeting. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Villapondo. Anybody else?
I just had one last point, but it's not only, I think, important to have the rubric in case we have too many applicants, but so that we can make sure that we're in compliance with the composition of this committee needing to have a majority of parents of students currently enrolled in the district. And I think that's one of the problems that we had in the fall. But I also agree with Ms. Villapondo about the scheduling being very clear and preemptive. So.
Ready to move on? Next item.
Madam President, we're going to asking to remove A2, the core commitment update. We have a packed agenda for May, so if we could do that in June, I think it'll be a little bit quieter, and Mr. Fernandez will do a great presentation.
We all good with that?
10B, construction update, Ms. Griffith.
Coleman will be here to present to you the latest construction update, and also we'll be giving you the update on where we are with the Child Development Center. We've got some quotes in and what that's gonna cost, so we'll bring that to you on Monday.
Mr. Redondo?
Yeah, I had a question on the construction update. I'd like an update on the central office construction renovation project. I know the rhetoric at the time that brought that to the board for several meetings and several conversations was that it was such a time-sensitive issue, that we're paying rent, that we have to take action, that we're procrastinating as a board. And I'm not talking to staff, I'm talking about like what we were told when we were being lobbied by our colleagues to take action on the central administration building, was that it was such a timely issue because we were paying rent by the month, and you know, we were gonna have to renew our contract over at the old mill and so on and so forth. So I'd like to see like where we are in that process and what our timeline is for that, because again, it was, the rhetoric surrounding that issue was that it was so time sensitive, and I don't know if that, now that the vote has taken place, it's not time sensitive anymore, but.
Oh, no, we're working on it.
Yeah, no, I understand y'all are, but again, I just think it was such a hot button issue up here but we haven't really talked about it recently, so I'd like to have a follow-up.
So we're gonna add that to the,
Yeah, I can tell him to put that in there. He may already have that in there, because he
Yeah,
already,
we meant
Do we
to.
have a hydrology report on the site?
I don't know, but I can find out.
Okay.
Ms. Halsey?
Could I just request that that update include, for my own edification, an explanation of exactly the boundaries of the whole Mendez property, where we are renovating, and how much unused property is on that site?
Talking about the Child Development Center?
No, Mendez, for the central administration,
Okay.
for that
For
report.
admin, for the admin boundary. Okay, Mr. McLaughlin, did you have something?
I did not.
Are we good?
Thanks. So Little Birdie told me, AKA I saw it on Twitter, that I guess Bonham is requesting parking or additional parking lot or something to that effect, or I heard about it at some function in the community. Sorry, Michael, it's a small town. And
That's a problem.
so, I mean, I know it's that the issues like that have been brought to the board in previous board votes, budget amendments. I think it came to budget amendment when we did the parking lot behind Mendez. So I don't know if that's like a internalized process. Obviously, I know it's like an administrative decision, but obviously if it comes to us as a fund balance expenditure. But if we have issues like that at some of our campuses, I know like the visitor parking here at San Marcos High School is atrocious. As an individual community member, I came the other day for an award thing for my sister, and the student parking lot was closed, and I had to park in the teacher parking lot, and then I had to walk all the way around, and then someone thought I was a kid, and I had a very lively conversation with an SRO who thought I was skipping. And so again, the need for visitor parking at San Marcos High School, I think, is an issue, and I don't know if that's how it is at other campuses. So I'd like to see a process or some type of procedure take place if those are unmet needs on the campus. How are those being addressed district-wide? Okay.
Anyone else? Proceed.
Item 10C, TASB Board Policy Update 110, this first reading. Mr. Watson.
Good evening, board members. Yeah, this is TASB Policy 110. It's an update. It's not as extensive as 109. It's 11 policies that TASB is asking us to update. Actually, out of the 11, 10 are legal, which are the ones that we don't have a choice. Those are reference to legislation, lawsuits, federal things, state items as well. And then there's one local policy update, which is referencing our elections and things of that nature. We answered a survey referencing our elections, our terms. As you know, we're under a court order still for elections, and so all that's entailed under that local policy. And TASB has actually developed that policy for us for your for your review and consideration. And the other area is dealing with the last area is dealing with local revenue. That's dealing with bonds. And so Ms. Griffith has had the opportunity to look at that, and it's a legal area, so it's not any area. It's nothing we can do anyway, but it's in reference to some things that have come down from the state government from the last legislative session.
Questions or comments? Board member continuing education report.
Item 10D is just a board member continuing education report that will be provided. Ms. Georgianne, so she's out, so she'll provide that. Item 11A, approval of minutes for regular scheduled board meeting on April 16, 2018, and special call board meeting on May 14, 2018. Item B, 11B, personnel action. We have that right now, but as a placeholder, but we potentially, yes, would have some.
Right, it is a placeholder for the potential for us having any of our administrator positions for approval for that evening. It's not likely, like Mr. Cardona has mentioned, that we'll have something to present for you next Monday for this particular agenda item.
If it's administrators, could it be moved down to item 12?
Sure, we can move the placement.
Yeah, if it's administrators. If it's teachers, then that's not, or other staff members.
I can work with Ms. Logue on that. Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Halsey?
11B.
Yeah, I don't know if it goes under this item or not, but there's some information that I'm interested in getting, and one piece of that is the number of people that accepted our early out option. So I'd like to have,
I can tell you now if that's okay. Okay, we've
Okay.
had 21 people that have accepted our early resignation since.
21, okay. And I'd also be interested in knowing how many applications we are receiving because of the efforts that y'all put in to go around doing the tour, which I've been following on Twitter, and I think it's great, but I'd just like to know how that, like what that is actually returning. And I'm also interested in knowing, I don't know if we'll have the final number by May or if we wouldn't have that until June, but how many first-year teachers are not returning in the fall? So whenever that information is available.
We'll have it for you.
Thank you.
Are you talking first year in the district or first year to teach?
I think both first year in the district and first year teaching.
Yeah, I'd like to see those separated. That's-
Sure.
Mr. Redondo, did you have a question or comment?
I was gonna follow up on that, what Ms. Hanson requested.
And do we do, Mr. Watson, when you update us on first year teacher turnover, what do we do right now with regard to exit interviews? Is that done by your office?
Yes, sir. We actually transitioned from a kind of a mandatory in-person exit interview to an online process. We develop an online climate questionnaire that's produced. We send checklists of items to complete. It's multiple reasons why we transitioned to this. One is we used to require all employees to come over. You can imagine between May and June, we would process 100, 150 exits and separations, as well as process the same amount of people coming in the district. And so our team were spending an exorbitant amount of time dealing with those two pieces. And so just part of our efficiency effort, we moved that online. I will say in our information that we send out to our staff members on that electronic process, we do give them an option to come in if they like to visit. And we have people that do choose to come in and would like to talk to us and not just do the online form. So we give them that option.
So the results of the online exit interviews should be available to us, I guess, if we.
It will be available. Yeah, we just started that process. So, next August to September, that's something that we could provide in HR.
So for everybody that's left, that is leaving and is transferring out, you have those online?
Yes, we have, it's required for everyone to complete an exit interview online, but again, they can choose to come in as well, but they still have to do the online version.
You have?
Yes, Ms. Cantu, thank you. I guess my question on the employment agenda item, the executive session, I know we have several like high-level positions that are open right now on the SMCISD Human Resources Portal. Mr. Watson, you don't see any of those positions being filled at this meeting, do you?
No, when we thought there was a possibility, but it's not looking like for this this regular board meeting that we'll have any for your consideration or approval.
Okay, and this is more of anything, and I agree with Trustee Hanson that unless this was teachers or anything like that, then I'd be comfortable having this at the end, I guess, moving forward as a personal preference. Whenever we have some of these positions when, for all intents and purposes, we're fairly confident that this employee is gonna be in the gallery with their family and that the board is gonna take affirmative action on it, to have like their wife and kids or their husband, their spouse, their significant other, their partner and their children sitting here until like 11 o'clock at night, and then we kind of do that. I mean, if there's just a preference of if we can move those things to the beginning of the meeting, I think for all intents and purposes, I think it makes it a much easier process and procedure. But that's just moving forward as we hire those positions in the future.
And if the board chooses, I can visit with Ms. Logue about that as well.
The board agree?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you.
Item 11C, consider an approval of donation from San Marcos Industrial Foundation. This is actually, believe this is actually a grant that Mr. Doyle and Ms. Fowler received from CenturyTel, Mr. Navarrette's group. They applied for a grant on coding this summer, so we apologize that this is coming, but we've already have the check.
And how much was the donation?
$14,500. We actually found out about it at a San Marcos Education Foundation meeting. They said it was a simple process. We came back, somebody applied, and next week we found out, hey, you got it. So we took it.
Good job. Items for action?
Item 12A, consider approval of budget amendments.
I know we'll have the one for the CDC and another one.
From CDC, and what was the other one? Instructional?
No, the CDC one, I'll have that one on the budget amendment, but a campus turned in another one. I don't know, don't have.
Item 12B, consider an approval of San Marcos CISD administration to develop local graduation requirements for students who entered grade 9 before 2011-12. There's a draft copy on the dais. Mr. Barton spoke about this last month.
We did bring this to you in April, but we pulled it back. It stayed a couple weeks behind.
I took a few bites.
The language. I also included kind of a markup of how they progressed on their language, so you could see how that rule evolved from the beginning till now. Just as a background, in case you hadn't had a chance to read it yet, this refers to students prior to the STAR accountability system, TAX. And in the last legislature, TEA was required to come up with alternate requirements that might enable them to graduate with a high school diploma or be awarded a high school diploma. There are a series of requirements, alternate requirements that they defined, that if a student got a GED, if they have military service, if they demonstrated TSI readiness on any number of exams, they qualify for a high school diploma. There's an opportunity in the final, and the underlying language on the draft is what I'm referring to here, that the school board can authorize the district to develop a local criteria, which would allow a student to demonstrate proficiency in the content area. TASB provided language for us, and I have that in italicized language here. It looks just like the IGC protocol that we go through for STAR students. As that's the most permissive thing for students, we are going to present it to you, and we'll take your guidance from there.
Madam President,
Ms. Vivian?
who would be on the individualized graduation committee?
It's an administrator, a counselor, a teacher in the area of the content, and then a student. And in this case, we won't have many parents. These students are over 18. But in theory, you could have a parent in there also, and then anyone else who's relevant. If you're bringing together a body of work over 2 or 3 years, you might have 2 or 3 teachers. So it depends on the situation and the student. And that's why this one's a little bit difficult. We had some great questions about IGC practices. It's a little bit difficult to pin down because it is very student-focused and looks a little bit different each time. It takes into account what that student's good at, what their experiences are, and how they might demonstrate proficiency in that area. And the committee reviews the project that they assign.
So if this was pre-STAR, which test did these potential kids not pass?
This would be the tax test.
There's a tax was like an exit requirement.
Yes, sir.
It was a general, they weren't subject EOCs, right? So it's just the general tax. I don't remember, I don't recall.
Yes, sir. There was a tax math, a tax ELA, a tax science, and tax history.
So those were kind of predecessors to the current EOCs.
It was just oriented towards the junior year instead of earlier in their career.
Freshman, sophomore. And so these individuals presumably would have achieved whatever credits were required in their graduation plan, but failed to pass the subject matter test.
Yes, sir.
One or more, right?
And how many do we have?
We guesstimate about 30 that we have contact with. We've had over the last 4 or 5 years students coming back retaking the tax test. It just gets harder and harder to demonstrate that when you're out of the school system and not receiving instruction daily. So we have points of contact, we think, with about 30 to 50 kids who may show up. And again, we had to have been their last school district of residence. People just can't show up on our doorstep. But if we've been serving them and they're in our community and they were our kids, they would have a right to come seek a diploma with us.
Just a regular diploma,
Sir?
and they would go to graduation.
No, sir. I don't think we would do that, probably because of timeline.
And how would they know to apply?
We believe we have points of contact, mostly through our Phoenix program that's been servicing these students, with about 30 that we could reach out to. We have a phone number, we have just relationships, because they've been intermittently coming in to see us, and then probably from there it'll be word of mouth.
Do we do any advertising on our website or something at least?
We can look at that.
I would
do a great outreach for that.
You'd have all
because-
kinds of people show up.
Yeah.
I don't know what that would.
But if you explain it, you know, and then maybe have a point of contact, I would hate for somebody to be left out because they did.
SMCISD leavers, I think they used to call them leavers, right? They did. Mr. Redondo, you had a question or comment?
No, I'm fine, just kidding.
Okay. I think it's very good that we're gonna do that.
Item 12C, consider appointment of 2 members to the community partnership. If you remember, about a month ago, I mentioned I'd met with the city manager and Hayes County representatives. I believe the city, they may have appointed 2 city council people, but this is part of the effort to have a yearly meeting between all 3 that kind of gets us more in line around workforce development. We've talked about like addressing the homeless situation, like seeing ways to work together to potentially build housing that will help our families and communities. And so I won't be here, so I don't know.
I think that's a great opportunity to pull the community together. That isn't just the city working by themselves and the school district working by themselves.
I just had a question about who would, so there'd be 2 appointments from our board, and then would you as superintendent also sit on the committee?
Correct.
And anybody else from SMCISD, or their staff, other staff people?
Depending on what it has to do with would be central office administrators potentially.
Okay, so I just want to understand more, like, if it's one yearly meeting, or if this is a standing subcommittee.
It's a minimum of two times a year.
Okay, and it's the city and the county, and so the city and the county would have equal representation to the school board?
Two appointees.
And then.
Hayes County gets a little bit nuanced because, well, we get a little bit nuanced because we have Caldwell and Guadalupe.
Right.
But the thought was to start with Hayes first since it's so big, and then potentially a year out, move into other counties to bring representation.
And so the city would appoint 2 council members,
Correct.
and then they would also have the city manager,
And their staff.
and then a standing staff person if, as needed,
Correct.
and the same with the Hayes County
County.
Commissioners?
Yes, the city's the driving organizer. We'll get everything together, we'll organize, we'll put the Open Meetings Act paperwork together, and they would all be open meetings to be as transparent as possible.
Being held in Hayes.
I'll send you kind of the guideline that Mr. Lumbreras has sent me.
That would be
I'll
helpful.
email it to y'all. That kind of goes through the whole thing.
Thank you.
To your district emails. So you'll have to consider appointing 2 people.
Yes.
Okay. Item 12D, consider of award of bid proposal for new elementary school. Karen?
We got our bids in, and we're excited. They all came under budget, so we'll be presenting that to you. The award proposal on Monday.
It's exciting to hear they're under budget.
Yes, so were we, very
Yes,
much
we
so.
were very excited.
Is that a lot of material to, I mean, is that, what all are we getting in,
This would be the construction, so this is everything.
right, I understand, but are y'all picking it was a just closed bid, so it generally goes to the
Yeah, this was a
lowest?
competitive sealed proposal, not necessarily, there was other factors, and I'll show you the scoring sheet and what they got, so that it wasn't based just on price. You have number of days to complete the project, then you have to evaluate the kind of work that they do, any lawsuits, pending lawsuits, the people that are gonna be overseeing the whole construction project. You wanna make sure that you're getting a superintendent, project manager, and Those lead people, you want to make sure they have plenty of experience. They know about working in a K-12 environment. So, at least with this one, you're not really having to secure the environment. But you want to make sure that they have a lot of level of experience in these type of construction projects.
So if that, I'm sure that would come in our packet, but if that sounds like some material that might take me some time to digest.
All we're doing is giving you the score. We've already evaluated. There was a team of us, so we're going to show you all the amounts, and we'll show you the scores, and then we'll show you the highest. If you have any questions, you can ask us, but they've already been evaluated.
Okay.
Item 12E, consider approval of changes to policy CDA local.
This is the second reading of the policy that I brought for y'all on the investment that we're just changing to allow longer periods of investment.
And item 12F, consider an approval of non-administrative professional personnel contract renewals for the 2018-2019 school year.
Board, as you remember, as you recall, back in March, you approved the renewal for our teacher-related group. This particular group are the people that we've hired after January 1st. We give our principals and evaluators a couple more months to make some final determinations on whether or not a person should be recommended for their contract renewal for the 18-19 school year. We have 19 people that are in this category, and so we'll have those names, that information for you for next week.
Do we need to have a closed session attached to this?
Yes, ma'am. We'll move, when I visit with Ms. Lugg, we'll move 11B down. And so they'll give us the option if the board would like to go to closed session,
Oh, okay.
if you choose.
Anything else?
I have a question.
Ms. Halsey?
So are we not in May considering the name for the new elementary school? Are we moving that to June? Is it?
It's on here.
Did I just miss it? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Then,
It's at the very beginning.
okay, I was expecting it to be under items for action. So we don't need it under items for action?
I'm sorry?
Do we need to have it under items for action?
It's just a report right now on the agenda. Doesn't say.
That
Oh,
we
okay.
expect
Okay.
some, we expect
Word is not-
visitors,
I
and
see.
so that's why we moved it.
Okay,
up.
then I was wondering if there would be interest from my colleagues in putting together a committee to consider naming the Child Nutrition Center, since it went without a designated name when we opened it. So that was a question I had open to the board.
I'd be
Naming the Child Nutrition Center.
open to that. If that's a request, and I'll do a second.
Yeah.
The one, right, because so we could form a committee to take applications for that and consider it. But,
If a agenda item request is submitted, I'll be the second signature on that, Ms. Halsey, if necessary.
How does the rest of the board feel?
Well, naming sure seems non-controversial. Throw some more stuff.
Thank you, John.
Yeah. I don't know. If they want it on there, we can put it on. I don't know. Are you saying in?
She wants an agenda item.
I could bring it forward as an agenda item, but to take a vote on appointing a committee, or we could just direct staff now that we would like to make appointments to form such a committee, or have that conversation in the board meeting.
I think right now someone can. Mr. Watson, when we did that rules, didn't we provide for this? Like someone can just fill out a naming request for an existing facility and then it comes to us?
That's correct, Mr. McLaughlin. We actually have it in policy, and we set the precedent back in February. If the board directs the administration to begin the naming process for either a building or a facility, that requires board action, like you did in February. That directed us as a team to get started with the whole process of the committee and meetings and things of that nature. So if there's an agenda item for that, and if the board approves that, like was done in February for the new school, then the administration will move forward.
Maybe we'll pull that up, but I thought there was also a way that it could come the other direction. Like someone could submit this name request for an unnamed district facility, and then it would it would come to us. We didn't have something like that, like a reverse trigger in the procedure?
The
That-
original policy had that, and the policy that the board approved removed that from.
Because we didn't, because like if we were gonna name, it shouldn't always take a committee. Sometimes we could just name the library, like,
The-
or something, you know, it wouldn't.
Previous policy had a citizens can gather signatures and petitions, and there was a
think
signature
that was
petition
removed.
going around, and not to say that they were connected or one and the same, but the board voted to, on an
I
updated
think
policy
we
that doesn't
removed
have
that.
that anymore.
Okay.
I don't have the policy in front of me, but as much as we worked on it, I
Yeah.
think we removed that.
Hmm.
So it has to come back to.
It's all board directed now, based on current policies.
Ms. Costilla?
I was just gonna say that before we go forward with that step, as far as putting a committee to name, I think this board needs to have consensus on whether we want to rename it or not. Or do we want to put a name on the CDC? I mean, Child Development
The
Center.
food-
I'm talking about child nutrition, but
Child nutrition.
Which one?
CDC is another one.
Well, I think that we
Lamar
need to decide
Fund
whether we're
Balance
gonna
Building.
be naming all these facilities. And if we are, then yeah, we can go forward to doing a committee, but we haven't even had a consensus here whether we're going to go forward with that.
That's why she's bringing it up, so that we can toss it around.
Well, I mean, do we need to have a discussion on naming facilities here? And if we're gonna be naming facilities, then let's make a list of all these facilities we're gonna name.
And at one time, we also talked about renaming. At a previous board meeting, we also
Well,
talked about
naming and renaming, I think we need to have a discussion, vote on it, and then go forward to the next step, is putting a committee together.
So just as a recap, are we having it on there or not?
I'll submit an agenda item for it then.
Okay, then I'll be the seconding trustee for that item.
Anybody else that sees anything else needs to be added before we move on?
Oh, we're gonna do that in May? I'd prefer to do that in June, at least individually, deal with the name we have,
Let's,
move on, because I also.
would you be willing to wait till June, Ms. Halsey? To put it on the June agenda instead of putting it into the May agenda? For naming?
I guess she doesn't have to make that decision tonight.
Yeah, I
She
need
can
to think
submit
about
the paperwork tomorrow or whenever, per board policy, to submit an agenda item request.
I mean, if we're gonna have a discussion, if we're gonna have a discussion about whether we're not going to start, whether we're gonna start the process, then I would probably prefer to have it in May. If we're just gonna take a vote, June is fine. I don't necessarily see a persuasive argument one way or the other,
I would
but
rather separate it from the elementary naming.
So you're kinda saying,
I'm
let's
fine with
let's
that.
do
I'm
the
fine with
elementary.
putting it in June, yeah.
You're okay with June?
Yep.
So let's get the May, you leave the naming of the new elementary school for May, and then we'll put it on an agenda for discussion and possible action.
That would be great.
And I think that concludes.
Madam President, that's Central Administration's presentation for agenda prep.
And now we're ready for our budget workshop. Do we want to take a quick break before we have a budget workshop? Is that going to be okay with you? Mr. Put your tennis shoes way back.
Completely forgot about the budget workshop.
I saw you.
Okay, I know that the board was really wanting to know, I know at the last board meeting, we approved salaries, and so they were wanting to know with our revenue projections, what that kind of looks like all put together. So I've put together a draft, and please understand this is a draft because we have not finalized. Normally, we have a couple of months to go through, reconcile, finish with the departments, and we have not had a chance to do that, but we are currently working on it and validating all the numbers. So at first glance, we did get our appraisal numbers. They came in at 13.5% increase. Normally when I do my revenues, you know I'm conservative, so I normally take that and I'll take about 97%, which is reducing about 3% of that.
What was the percentage? I'm sorry, I missed, what was the percentage increase?
13.5.
13.5.
You had budgeted for 8, right? In your preliminary?
Yes.
Wow, 13 and a half.
Didn't you get your
Yes.
statement?
Mine
It
went
was
up
like-
5.
Mine went up 2.
But apparently we're having a lot of growth here in San Marcos as well. So I believe our commercial, that was where we saw most of the growth was in commercial real estate. So with that said, Mr. Cardona is making me go less conservative. So I am totally out of my comfort zone. So I'm sure, John, you will appreciate that. So, so you will see the numbers. This is at a 1% for RBI, so for any protests. The difference between a 1% and a 3% was about $1.3 million. But since our revenue, if you look over the course of the last 5 years, it's like it's been about $1 million difference in appraisal values. So it's almost like I'm taking too much off. So we went ahead and went with the higher. Do y'all understand what I'm talking about? So I went with the higher number, and so our revenues, which you'll see on the second page, that's where you're going to see the most increases from our tax roll. But please understand that the state doesn't let us have all that. So if you can look down at the state numbers, you'll see that the state is now, they took half of that back. Okay, so our numbers, the amount that we're getting from the state is, as we are growing, they are taking more and more back. So if you look at your state allocations, you'll be able to see, like our foundation payment last year, we got $10 million, and this year we're only projected at 4. So that's soon, within the next 2 to 3 years, we'll be in recapture, and that number will be negative, and that will be money that we'll have to be sending back to the state.
We're still a net recipient at the moment.
Yes. Okay?
But not much as before.
No, it's slowly dwindling. The faster we grow, the more they're going to take. So we need to make sure that we're growing our student projection numbers faster. So remember, tell your friends, have a couple kids.
Yes, a young man like you. We need lots of young people.
So when you put in the salaries and everything that we've had, all the increases, all the additional positions, everything, when you put everything together, you'll see that there's about a $517,000 difference over the negative fund balance that we passed last year, which isn't too bad. But within this 517 number are 2 additional items that we want to present to you tonight that are already included in this number. We got our TRS numbers back, and one of the things that is disturbing that we got with the health insurance is that they're not allowing people to go to, is it Plan 2? Okay, so what that means is that anybody new coming in, they're going to be forced to Plan 1. And in Plan 1, it's the high deductible plan. You really get no benefits. When you go to the doctor, you have to pay full cost. And last year, we found out that several of our employees were not, especially our custodians, food service, and maintenance workers, they don't go to the doctor even when we had that stuff of flu, because they'll tell you, well, I can't afford $150 to go to the doctor. So one of the things that we did is we sat down with Brady and we said, hey, what can we do and add to help our employees?
Does
Something
everybody
that-
know Brady? Brady?
Oh, sorry. I just assume everybody does. Brady is our benefits plan administrator. He's the one who administers our Section 125, which means that he helps us with our enrollment, with all of our insurance. That includes your health insurance, dental insurance, cancer insurance, all the disability, yeah, all supplemental. Everything that we have, they're the plan administrators for that program. So anyway, we went back to the table and we're talking about what could we do for employees, and we had several options, and then Brady came up with one that we thought would be very, very beneficial to everyone. Actually, this would be for every employee, but it would especially help people on Plan 1, which is, is everyone familiar with Teladoc?
Yes.
Okay, Teladoc is or you know what, I'm gonna let Brady come explain it.
Good evening. So our idea was with Teladoc and telemedicine in general is that it's essentially a benefit that gives employees access to physicians 24/7, 365 days a year. And with the plan that the district offers now through Teladoc, it's $7.75 per month on a voluntary basis, and that covers your entire family. So even if they're not on the district's health plan, they can still be on this plan. What we're proposing moving forward is offering this plan for a district-paid benefit. Because it's a district-paid benefit, they're going to lower it from $7.75 per month down to $6. And that covers, again, the entire family. And what that does or allows the employee to do is they call in, again, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's no copay. They can receive treatment, basic medical care. They can prescribe medication by these consultations, and it's non-DEA controlled substances. So think like sinus infections and things like that. But again, it's for the entire family. And the idea, again, with the Active Care 1 HD plan is that employees just won't seek treatment right now. If they're going to the doctor to pay $150, they'd rather just kind of stay out and fight it versus pay the $150 to get the actual diagnosis and treatment that they need. With the Teladoc or the telemedicine benefit, there's no copay. They call in and they can actually call in that medication for them. They go pick it up. The other benefit, the ancillary benefit, I think, is that it saves them time. And so not from having to take off time from work to actually go see the doctor physically, they can call in and get that treatment over the phone and then go pick up that medication. And if they're able to continue to do that.
This
we
is
looked
new,
at-
or we already had it?
This will be a new employer-paid benefit. Currently, there's about 250, depending on the month, employees that pay into the voluntary program for $7.75 per month. So what this would do is it would eliminate their payment and give them the benefit at no cost, and also add in the benefit. We looked at a couple different options, a gap plan, but in talking to Mr. Watson and Ms. Griffin, the gap plan is designed to kick in when you have hospital expenses, so those bigger expenses. And we really wanted something that was, and it was more expensive for the district, but wanted something that would affect, first dollar coverage, so right away. So these more minor illnesses, and it's for the entire family.
Halsey?
I'm just wondering what the total cost is to the district for the year, and also, is there a point at which we could evaluate, and if in 6 months nobody was actually using the service, if we could change, or, how would that work?
Yeah, we actually review, they send out quarterly claims reports to give you an idea of utilization, not only on a aggregate basis, but also per illness, like what was actually diagnosed and treated and what the outcome was.
Okay.
And as far as cost, if it's for the entire district, roughly about 1,250 employees at $6 a month. You're looking at about $7,500 a month.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Right. So, my own experience with telemedicine is that they have limited breadth, right? They can't see you, they can't evaluate you. You just kind of lead the conversation. If it's something simple, like I think I got a sinus infection, I might be able to get myself to a medication, but we're probably not as worried about sinus infections as we are something more serious that may present as a rather simple thing, and for that it's hard to beat a on-the-ground physician in the flesh. Have we explored, Ms. Griffith, any sort of partnership with a local clinic that would provide low-cost primary care to our employees?
At this time, no, but we are talking, we have started communications with that, and we are looking at trying to do that. But in the meantime, we kind of wanted to do something immediately. But with the question you just said, last year we were faced with the flu epidemic. A lot of them, because we've all used the teledoc, you can call and sometimes they FaceTime you to look at you, to see, to have a face-to-face with you. It all depends on who you call and the doctor that's being prescribed to you and what your illness is. But they could have diagnosed the flu without doing a swab and gave you teleflu without having to go. But yes, it's only for, we're talking about stuff that, you wouldn't want to go to the doctor. If you had something seriously wrong with you, of course you'd want to, and if you called teledoc, they would tell you, you need to go see a physician, a healthcare physician.
But it's kind of like foxes guarding the hen house in that they're employees of the insurance carrier, right? Rather than, no, they're not.
No, they're licensed physicians.
Right, I understand that, but who writes their paycheck?
The paycheck for.
Right. Do y'all pay them per service? Like when someone calls in, does the carrier pay them, $20 to take the telephone, or are they salaried by the insurance carrier?
They're paid per service, per visit.
Okay, so they're independent contractors, I guess.
Yes, correct. Yeah, it's a network, and there's several different telemedicine providers, but they all use essentially the same network of
Okay.
providers.
Well, I don't think this is overall a good idea, but I would still prefer to see something where we could go to like a local clinic, like, well, I don't want to bury a clinic by naming them and all this, sudden them having 1,000 patients, but somewhere they could go for $40. I mean, I think people will pay. It's just if the barrier is $150, that's pretty tough. But if we had, some provider network locally, maybe in conjunction with CTMC or something like that, I think that could, on top of this, provide more cover.
We are looking at not only just for employees, but Mr. Cardona wants to do that for students. So I know that we are currently trying to look at that. We just don't have enough information to present to y'all at this time. It's still going to take a little bit more work and research.
Ms. Hanson,
I would like to see a computer available at each campus. It doesn't have to be designated just for this, but have access for all employees to do the face-to-face. To me, I mean, I read a lot of medical records every day at my work, and they do a lot of that in the military, where you don't actually have to go in, but you do see somebody and they see you. Because I think a lot of people that would want to access this may not even have the computer access available. So if you're at work and you feel like you have a sinus infection or something like that, it'd be
Go to
easy.
work. Oh, sorry.
What?
They don't need to go to work if they're sick.
Well, if you have a sinus infection, don't you still go to work?
Because I don't want to get everybody
Well,
sick.
you're your own boss. That's not contagious.
it's not contagious.
I want to thank staff for bringing this forward. I think it shows that you're being responsive to the needs of staff, so I appreciate that. I'll echo Mr. McLaughlin's comments. I think, for me, seeing and hearing stories, it's, strep throat, the cost of amoxicillin and the prescriptions to actually cure some of these ailments, and the high deductible more than going to see the doctor themselves. Like they know that they're sick. It's just paying for the antibiotics to make them not sick anymore. And so I know Texas State does it, and I think it's just because they're such a large employer. But as we have this conversation and move forward, Mrs. Griffith, Mr. Cardona, like employee-based health programs in the district, whether that's free flu immunizations. We talk about eye checks, hearing checks, all of that. As we have this conversation, I'd look forward to the future conversation of looking at this at a much grander scale, because again, I don't think it's people who have the flu that are being hit the hardest with the high deductible. It's people who have curable illnesses, but are they going to pay the out-of-pocket thousands of dollars to get there? I think if it's the flu thing, I think we can figure that out locally, but I think it's a step in the right direction, but I look forward to, I guess, the larger proposal or the school-based health clinics down the road, so.
It's good that you're taking care of our staff.
We try.
I have a question in terms of where would this expense, where am I seeing it in any of these budgets?
I have it in with campus allocations.
It wouldn't be a payroll cost?
Yes, it's gonna be a payroll cost because it's part of the insurance plan.
Right.
So it's.
That's what I'm wondering, is why the budgeted amount for payroll is decreasing so significantly from year to year. while the campus allocations is increasing.
Okay, that's other payroll costs, which are your subs. It says TRS, unemployment insurance, statutory min. So these are things that, that aren't included in your base salary and benefits. These are other items that the district has to pay.
Right, but
that
I'm
aren't.
saying personally, I would like to see if we go ahead and approve the teledoc, that be included as one of the base benefits that we offer so that it not be in a campus allocation.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean campus, I meant the salary benefit. It's already in that 60.
It's already in that first one.
Yes, it's
Okay,
already in the
that makes sense
65
to me.
million.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thank you.
Okay, the next initiative that I have is one of the things that I learned this year when we were doing some training, is that I was always under the assumption that the district paid for meals for students when they went to athletic events. I since learned that, yes, that it was the booster clubs that raised money for these. I've never worked for a school district that did that. Even in my poor school district, we always paid for meals for kids because we wanted to make sure, especially if they were out there, you know, doing something, yeah, for the district, and you're exerting a lot of energy, you're hungry. And so I think we, you know, owe them a meal for exerting that kind of energy. So what we have put into the budget, and especially like band and cheerleaders and, you know, everyone else. So we have put a $100,000 allocation here. I don't know if we're going to use that much. It will be just for student meals so we can evaluate this year. But what we are doing is that we're putting this budget aside to now pay for all UIL sponsored activities. So if it's UIL sponsored, then each student will be given a $5 allocation for a meal. So that means that we can either put something together for food service, we can partner with Jason's Deli or Shalotsky's or Whataburger, where we do the student meals, the $5 meals, and a lot of those places will work with you and put together, you know, packages for the foods. But this will ensure that any time that they are playing a game and they're leaving, whether they're in band or sports or, you know, that we're giving them a meal after they have gone and competed.
Thank you, Ms. Cantu. I guess my question is, knowing students who are involved in athletics, I think the pregame meals, preferences, menus, level of meal is substantially different based on I guess, the profitability of the booster club. And so how is this reimbursement process taking into account, you know, one booster club might get Subway sandwiches for their 20 players versus an individual box lunch from Whataburger for all 120 of their players? Like how, I mean, is it?
That's a good question. That's why we wanted to make the playing field even, because you may have a booster club that raises all kinds of money because you have a lot of parent involvement, so they're able to sponsor these kids and get them better meals, where you have another sport that has no parent involvement and they're not getting any meals, and so they're barely getting sandwiches. So what we want to do is level the playing field where all kids are equal. It doesn't matter what sport you're in, and the purpose of booster clubs are to purchase things for the district that are very expensive and normally ununique in nature. So we want to replace something, or they want to add something, and it should be both beneficial to both girls and boys. So when you're evaluating this, you should be looking at Title IX to make sure what I do, is it benefiting both girls and boys sports equally? So I think that that's something that we want to take a look at, so we're making sure that when we use our booster clubs that we're adding value to the district. You know, we're not, you know, because we could use that money for other things, for band and for athletics and.
My follow-up question to that, though, is, so if a booster club has the money to pay $15 a meal for a student for the athletic event or whatever they do, because that's where they are putting their money as a booster club. So the school district is essentially saying, we'll pay for the $5 of that meal, or $8 or whatever that number is. What's stopping, prohibiting them from saying, okay, then we already used to spending $10 per meal per player. We'll take the school's reimbursement of $8 and put our 10 to it, and now we're getting them
even more? I mean,
We're
if
not
that's.
gonna allow them to do that.
We're not. We're
So-
standardizing the process.
So how do you standardize a process of which it's a parent-run organization that's not affiliated with the school district? Per se affiliated with the school district?
Okay, well,
Because
first,
UIL, well, let me answer that.
UIL.
UIL rules say the superintendent of schools controls everything, including the booster club.
Okay, so, and this was just anecdotal, I've been told that booster clubs have been told that they're not protected under school district liability insurance.
that is correct.
Correct.
But yet we're telling booster clubs what they can and cannot do because we control them, but yet they're not protected by our liability insurance. I'm just wondering where that those things align or don't align to where we have the authority to legislate what they do, but then say that they're also not a part of the school district or protected by our liability.
Okay, first of all, I will send y'all out, we had our attorneys that came and did a presentation for everyone to tell them what the roles and responsibilities are for a booster club. And the purpose of a booster club is to raise money to help an organization, a school, to do something. Okay, the purpose of them is not to just come in and dictate. In fact, they can't really dictate when we take a donation. They are not supposed to dictate to the district what we can and cannot do with the money. If they're going to raise money, and they can either donate the equipment, or they can either donate the money. But when they do that, it's up to the school's discretion on how, because they're basically giving us the money or the equipment, and it's up to us whether or not we want to accept that or not. And so they are supposed to be working on behalf of helping the district or the campus or whatever they're working for, to make it better for the kids that are at that campus in general. So that's.
What about the liability insurance where they're not protected by school?
They're a separate organization. They should be a 501c. If they follow their paperwork properly, they can be a 501c, but they are not. And if they want to use or do things, they're supposed to get general liability insurance, because our umbrella does not cover them.
But
only
we
employees.
just said that we have authority to dictate or manage what they do with their funds, or that we're in control of their funds, because we're.
What they do to
Well,
the
the
district.
funds are not the booster club's funds. The funds are student funds.
Well, for example,
Raised by the booster.
a booster club can raise money, but they have to get permission from the school to say, hey, school district, I want to give you $50,000 to pay for meals. Okay? We either accept or reject that. And it's, even if you give me the $50,000, I do not have to spend it on what you tell me to. Okay? Just, or you can say, I'm going to, I want to donate trying to remember what they've donated. What's that gator? They've donated a gator to that. Well, once it's donated to the district, it's up to the district's discretion to say where we want that gator or where we're going to use that gator. So they can raise the money all they want, but once they turn it over to the district, it's up to the district's discretion. So you can say that I'm going to give you $10,000 for meals, but that if the district is saying, no, we're not going to allow you to give us $10,000 for meals, that is basically what we're saying here. That,
And again, I'm just trying to understand this process because, again, with the conversation that we just had is that, so if they don't give us the money, then they can control what they do with it, but we are telling them that they have to give us the money because we've had issues before where they've had booster club accounts that we don't know what those expenditures are or who are the account holders for that and so on and so forth. And I mean, this has been an ongoing issue that we're trying to address.
and that is why we had a workshop with them.
Asking booster clubs to raise money independently of the school district for this athletic organization, but to turn over the money and that we tell them what they can do, what they can and cannot do with it because it's our money once they turn it over to us, but they are also not protected by our umbrella of liability coverage. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding what's going on.
Yes,
Can
you
I read you,
understand.
I'll send this to you as soon as I'm done, but can I read you what the role of the booster club is per UIL? So it's state law,
I
it's
mean,
not.
I understand what the language is. I'm just trying to understand what we're telling the parents, not
We're telling them exactly what the rules are.
What the rules, because there are a lot of parents that don't understand what the role of the booster club is. And so we did, like last year, we had an issue with commingling of funds with orchestra and a city. I mean, it was an issue that, I mean, could have gotten us, puts the district at liability. And so now we're standardizing. I think actually Ms. Griffith and the principal have a meeting in 2 days with all the booster clubs to go over all this with the parents. So it is going to be a change for this community, but it's a change that's been needed, and it puts consistency, and it keeps, like, even, this is just, the food is one aspect. You know, one of the other proposals is for us to have uniforms and that are on a rotating basis, because you have Goodnight that has a far bigger school and raises far more money and buys a different basketball uniform, right, than the parents over at Miller. So again, that's another area where the district should be having a replacement cycle for uniforms. And, you know, for some parents, that's gonna be like, well, you can't tell me. Well, no, the superintendent does have the sole discretion of telling booster clubs what they need to do, and they have to recognize that that's the role, that's my job, is to protect the district's interests. And sometimes protect them from parents themselves, because they don't know any different.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Okay, so this is an interesting topic. It's weird it came up during budget workshop, but that's just how things come sometimes. I mean, I'll say it's different with our centralization and our admin, like the staff and folks, they work for y'all. The students, they're under your care. But the parents are a little bit different, and they're the ones spending, in some cases, hundreds of hours in a school year making sure meets get pulled off, making sure funds get raised that are necessary, making sure banquets happen to celebrate the kids' accomplishments, and to then be, you know, that little bit of discretion they have of what do we think as a group of parents supporting this organization is best for our kids, to have that removed and told, well, we're gonna centralize that. I think that's a whole different road that we're going down, because they don't work for us. Those parents don't work for us. And if they aren't out there volunteering and pulling these things off, these things are not going to happen. So I know in bigger districts, they'll have an all sports booster club. They'll have an all fine arts booster club. I would be supportive of that, because the burden on the small sports booster parents, which are sometimes just, you know, 2 or 3 parents doing everything for many years in a row, is a very heavy burden. So I think if we're going to provide them some relief from that and say we're going to instead do an all sports booster club where we can raise funds more corporately and do things and get you manpower more corporately, then let's do it. That's taking on more responsibility, but if the district's not willing to take on, or we don't have the capacity to take on more of that responsibility to lighten the load, I think controlling the little bit of discretion those booster clubs have is probably not warranted.
Ms. Hanson?
But it's the law.
Well, that's what we say every time that we've got it. But I mean,
so
tell me
if
how it violates the law for a booster club to determine that they want to get T-shirts to celebrate a playoff victory or something, or if they raise the funds and they do it, why do we have to?
I mean, I think the question goes into, you know, when we have booster clubs selling playoff shirts out of private businesses where there's a cash accounting, and where we as a district don't have really any knowledge of what's going on in that private business to sell these shirts, and we're responsible for that. That's why you hired me. I mean, to be quite honest, you hired me to make sure that we enforced laws. And Booster Club, we are centralizing the Booster Club guidelines because we agree with you. I mean, it needs to be a central Booster Club authority. They're supposed to keep minutes, they're supposed to take votes, they're supposed to provide them. Hold on, you asked me. I mean, this is state law. This isn't Mr. Cardona mentioning it.
Tell me the law that we're violating.
UIL rules, it can
No,
disqualify.
not generally, specifically. What act is going on that violates a specific law?
Title IX. I mean, I've seen examples of violations that I think would verge on violation of Title IX.
I mean, there's a whole.
You have to deal with them in the specific, though, not in the abstract. Oh, we think there's something going on, and we've got to have legal compliance, because it feels like command and control the parents on the ground.
It feels like command and control when you haven't had command and control, right? When you've been accustomed to doing things a certain way, and then that's the response that we get of, well, this is the UIL rules. This is going to affect like our district, our kids' eligibility violating UIL rules. It can get teams disqualified. You know, CISD is a perfect example where a booster club decided to have a dinner, you know, They went all the way to the state championship, and the week before, UIL came in and said, oh, guess what? You're ineligible now. MacArthur, you're going to the state championship game. Because a group of parents at Katy decided that they thought they were doing what was right because I'm a parent, and it affected the entire campus. Fine arts, band, they all got removed.
But that's on the AD, right? That's currently
It's on the
within their
superintendent of
province.
schools.
Okay, I know this is a contentious conversation, but just to let you know,
Gotten contentious.
all of our
Should
coaches
not
were
have.
totally excited with this. They were so pumped when we said this. So this was not intended to be a bad thing. This is actually a good thing. This actually allows them, they said, so their booster clubs don't have to worry about meals. They have equity among all the kids. They were very excited about this. And so that all sports would be created equal and that they could use booster club money for other things that was truly needed for their sports. So this was not meant to be a mean thing. This was supposed to be a yay, hooray for athletics. I'm telling you all, the coaches are excited. They're waiting to hear what that y'all are going to approve this. So this wasn't a battle against the booster clubs. We are very, very appreciative of everything that they do, and they add value to the district, and that's what we want to continue. We don't want to take away that they really want to give this to the schools, but instead they're having to pay for meals because we don't provide the kids with meals. So this was supposed to be an addition, and so to make sure that the playing field stays equal to all kids in all sports, we were just setting a limit, saying that, and this is all away games, when a child leaves the district, so they're going on a what do you call it?
Weekend tournament.
Yeah, an away game. When they go for an away game, we're paying for those meals when they're here. And so booster clubs may want to do something different. They want to provide a meal for them at the end of the season, a congratulatory meal, and do something different where they get built. Or if they go to the playoffs and they want to take them somewhere special for the playoffs. But at least it allows the boosters a little bit more advantage to what they want to do with that money, and they don't feel like the primary purpose, especially at the middle school levels, is that they have to raise money for their kids to eat. And I mean, it's a little bit different on the high school side than it is the middle school side, but on the middle school, it's a struggle for them to get food for the kids, and it shouldn't be that way.
And I'm sorry, you said who is excited about this? The coaches or the
Yes,
parents?
the coaches.
So have y'all told the booster, no, you're meeting
No,
with the boosters?
we meet them.
next week?
But I'm not going to introduce them to something without the board approving it first.
Ms. Hanson?
I just want to applaud you for this. This is a great step forward. I coached high school sports, and I had to fill out requisition for meals for my students when we went out of town. And as a parent of two children who played tennis, they got nothing. They didn't get uniforms, much less meals. I bought the ice chest that the tennis team needed to be able to have, ice down water. So I'm really hoping that we can move forward to an all-sports booster club and all fine arts or whatever it takes, so that there's equal to all the others. I mean, having to buy their uniforms was ridiculous. That's something the school should have provided, but I was told by the AD at that time that they were a lesser sport, so they didn't get uniforms. So I'm really looking forward to this first step. As a parent of, child, I would think they'd be thrilled. I don't have to allocate the money for this. We can look for other opportunities to spend our money and not be, providing meals.
Ms. Costilla?
Well, I had a conversation with Ms. Griffin. I was telling her my 20-plus years with boosters. But one of the things that I'm glad that there are UIL rules that apply, because all the years that I was a booster, there was a lot of things that we used the money for. And that was primarily helping kids with their uniforms that they use during summer marching, or when it's in the band, when it's they don't use the regular uniforms, feeding them when they went in long-term out-of-town games, buying their food. But what comes to my mind is one particular one that I know that I've heard in the past, and that's a Diamond Line. The Diamond Line individuals, they have to go and raise their money to buy their uniforms. And I'm talking, in reference to parents that have said, well, my daughter is interested, but we can allow her to try out because we have to come up with this amount of money. I have a niece right now on my husband's side that has had to come out with lots of, so what are we gonna do? How is this going to impact that? Are we going to, is there gonna be money allotted for instance for this type of situation to where it's not coming out of a parent's pocket to participate in a organization like the Diamond Line? Because this is what's been happening. I mean, when you talk about I was just amazed as to the amount of money that it requires for a girl to be part of the Diamond Line. I mean, we're talking about heavy money here.
More than 500.
I'm sorry.
I mean, we can certainly look into that. I've seen, there are districts, and I'm just gonna throw this out there, they do provide, you've seen them, they're real fancy. Every girl, they provide those kind of like the band uniforms and stuff, and they alter them every year, but what they raise the money for is they like all the other gear, like the shorts and the t-shirts, and they have for different events, and so, and also
That's what we paid for, but
Yes,
once
so-
again, I'm just saying that if
Yeah.
we're going to be doing this with some of these organizations, I think we need to address all of them and make sure that we're going to be on an even keel with all of them. As far as, because this is what the boosters there do, and I know that this is what the band boosters did. We bought that additional items that, even instruments, we bought additional instruments because somebody needed an additional instrument. So there was a lot of things that went into not so much well, maybe what UIL allowed or did not allow, but it didn't go to our pockets. It went for the benefit of that student or the program in itself.
Ms. Halsey?
Yeah, I think this is a good step, and I certainly tremendously appreciate all the effort the boosters put in, and I know what they put in, right? I mean, I think we all do. And I think our programs would suffer significantly without that parental involvement. And so whether it's moving toward an all-sport model, whatever seems, I'd love to hear how the parents in the Booster Club feel about that and what their thoughts on it.
Let you know when they meet with them.
Is that an open meeting? We as trustees-
But also, I will say that I think that there's a broad range of ways in which we deal with different sports and activities, and the more uniformity, the more we can move to some sense of equity amongst those activities, I think, and accessibility, the better. So I have a question about the food. So if we say that there's a $5 allocation, I would personally love to see that the food services provide the meal for every, that it's signed up just like we sign up for other activities. If it's a field trip, they sign up for X amount from the cafeteria, but that would be my preference. But I'm assuming that if it's a $5 allocation per student and the Miller girls volleyball team selects a $5 sandwich from the cafeteria and the boys varsity football team gets the $5 sandwiches, I'm assuming the Booster Club is still able to supplement the varsity boys' food with extra gallons of, there's going to be a discrepancy between what my 7th grade daughter needs and what a varsity boys football player is going to need, right? So hopefully the boosters can fill in some of those gaps where the district can't. But I think the other thing is to put the onus on the district taking responsibility for leveling the playing fields, right? Because I've seen a broad discrepancy in the way the activity fees get raised and paid, and I think that's something that it would be great for us to look at. Transportation. It just became aware to me on Saturday that we don't, as a district, automatically provide transportation to district meets that are not happening inside our district. So I think that there's a lot, in the uniforms, I was very surprised that the onus is put on the boosters and the parents to pay for all of the uniforms, and that there isn't a consistent basis of rotating. It's one thing if the district would pay for the primary uniforms and then the boosters raised the sweats or the warm-ups or the whatever. That would make sense to me. Or they paid for the district bought all the Diamond Line uniforms and then the boosters paid for the extras. Right? Then that's the parent's decision to do that. But I just feel like there's a lot of discrepancies, and I think that they would very potentially be in violation of some significant.
Yeah, in its current form, I don't think this addresses the equity issue that Mrs. Costilla referenced and even Ms. Halsey does.
what I see this doing is it's going to turn already profitable booster clubs that are very cash positive into purchasing even more equipment for those teams. And it's gonna be blatant that the high profiting booster clubs are gonna be buying new uniforms year after year, or helmets, or pads, or what have you, but now they're not having to spend as much money on food, and the struggling booster clubs are still not gonna have the equipment or the services that are offered supplemental to that. They're just gonna have food for those students. Now, if this was a proposal to make all extracurriculars cost, a zero cost based on those students, if that's buying the makeup for the Diamond Line girls and looking at what those costs are to be in Rattler athletics or to be in volleyball or to be in speech and debate, I'd be much more happy having that conversation. And to kind of extrapolate this issue even further, I have concerns with us centralizing this purchasing with booster clubs, because at an anecdotal level, when the school district told the junior class which vendor they were going to use for prom, because it was a district decision of money that was raised independently of the school district on student and parent time, it was a weird dynamic to dictate what vendors are being used. And so if we have policies and procedures in place to prevent that practice from happening in the future, or if we have these booster clubs go out for bids, or if there's an actual policy that says vendors have to be local, then that addresses that concern. But I have big concerns about us encouraging parents to get involved in their child's education, and we say, spend your time, spend your money, raising money for your kid's extracurricular. But then, give that money to us, and then we get to decide what to do with it. I don't know any
I'm not,
other
okay, I
kind
think
of
you're taking what
personal-
I said out of context, but most of the time, when you have a booster club, the way it should be run is that your athletic coaches should be meeting with your booster clubs to have an initiative for that year. We're not here to say, oh, you're gonna do this, 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 and this. Okay, but you should together collaboratively say what is in the best interest of that sport or for all sports. So like if you're raising money for boys basketball, you should also be thinking about girls basketball as well to level the playing field. And what are we gonna do in the best interest of kids? Because that's what we're all about, is kids.
Well, I mean,
And it's not about feeding them. We should be feeding them already. The money shouldn't be going to food. The money should be going to
Extra stuff.
The booster club shouldn't even be paying for the uniforms. That should
I
be
agree.
a cost on the district. And that's what I'm saying is I think this food reimbursement thing doesn't address the equity happening in our extracurriculars. Like, let's talk about paying for the Diamond Line uniforms or the band uniforms or the makeup packages or things like that. But to say that we're just reimbursing $5 a meal or $8 a meal, I mean, those booster clubs that are already profitable are still gonna be doing what they've been doing successfully, which is great for them. But I don't think it addresses the struggling booster clubs that are already
So it's
there.
not a reimbursement. I think that maybe we said that wrong. It's not, we're not reimbursing the booster club for anything. We're taking over the purchasing of the food for the kids. So the booster clubs, like no one is, they can still raise money and the profitable booster clubs can still, but to supplement things, we should have the uniforms. We should be taking that over. We should be providing meals. So I don't think we're reimbursing anybody. And the other thing with the junior prom, that a student organization is different than booster clubs. And we have a lot of student-run organizations, elementary through, that we don't get involved with how they do what they do. But the booster club is, I agree, it should be a athletic booster club, because you've got football raising, I'm just using this as an example, I don't know numbers, raising 75,000, and then all of a sudden at one football game I see a gator out there, and the first question I ask as a superintendent is like, they just bought a $15,000 piece of equipment? Like, who approved that? The principal doesn't know anything about it. The athletic director didn't know anything about it. And that became district equipment. It's $15,000. Not that it's not valued, but who made that decision not following the rules? So we're just simply saying, use your money for the supplemental things. The district should be covering certain things for the kids, whether it's golf, who has 10 kids, we should be paying for their meals. We should be paying for their uniforms. We should be paying for their golf clubs. We should have a set of, 10 golf, but yet they have to raise their money. That's more expensive than some other sports. And so that's what we're trying to do.
And I agree, Mr. Cardona, and I guess my question though is why, if the Booster Club thought it was in their prerogative, if they are cash positive like that, to purchase a gator, when you say that it needed to be approved or who approved that, I mean, if a Booster Club wants to buy whatever for their team or their organization, if that's money that they raised, I mean, my mom sits in the concession stand at every volleyball game when my sister's on the court playing, and if they want to spend it on a gator for the volleyball team for whatever reason, I mean, then that's, I think, the Booster Club's prerogative, because they spent the time and effort and energy to raise that money. So I'm concerned that it might leave some parents to say, why are we putting our time, effort into these organizations if at the end of the day we're gonna have to run it by the school district that had little to no sweat equity in the raising of these funds to now tell us what we're going to do.
Wouldn't that just, if there's going to be a significant purchase, I mean, whatever the Booster Club is purchasing, right, it should be in conversation and with the coaches. It'd be strange if the Booster Club was just out there purchasing stuff and like random,
Yeah,
that,
no, I agree.
that the
Well, I mean-
coaches don't have an implementation plan for or whatever. So at least it would seem like there'd have to be somebody in the district taking responsibility for the.
So, I mean, I guess
Yeah,
with the
I mean,
gator example, did no one know, like, the gator just showed up, like,
The gator was there 1 week and it
and
was
no
literally,
SMCISD staff knew that the Booster Club was purchasing the gator?
I'm sure apparently some SMCISD staff, the trainer, maybe, I don't know.
But so if we're standardizing our own staff
We
to,
are.
to
We are.
follow procedures and to be responsible and
I mean,
to initiate the
communication.
conversations with the boosters and make sure that dialogue is productive, right? Like that
No, I
seems.
mean, I understand that, I think that needs to take place, but if the Booster Club wants to purchase something but does that mean SMCISD staff have the authority to say, no, you're not allowed to purchase it, or you can purchase the gator, but we won't take it? I mean, then that's the prerogative of the school district, but to tell any independent parent-run and staffed
I just don't think that those organizations are gonna work that way. I just don't know why a booster club is gonna work counter to the club, right? Like that doesn't,
We should be
But I
working
mean,
in unison.
that's
It
what we're
would be
essentially
working
saying
in
is
unison.
happening now, though, and that's why we need this policy to prevent it from continuing to happen. I mean, that's what we're saying is happening. Y'all are saying it's not happening, and that
It
the
happened.
Booster Club would work with the staff, but if that's already happening, then why are we bringing this policy forward?
Well, this isn't a policy, this is just paying $5
For
for
the
meals. I
meals.
don't think anybody up here thinks that injecting some money and for UIL traveling groups is a bad thing as to just the food. Clearly, we maybe need to have a broader conversation about booster clubs at the middle school and high school, because everybody has many thoughts. And I think that's because we hear it from people, in the community. So I would be open to discussing that, but I don't think we're gonna be able to solve all booster club issues in the context of a budget workshop.
Right. We move forward then, please?
And then the last one was we were allocating an additional $20,000 a year for junior high athletics for them to buy and replenish uniforms, and they would be on a rotating cycle. So those were the.
Is this when I freak out about the deficit now? Are we to that part?
You can freak out now if you'd like.
Okay, so I am pretty concerned. The $2,448,000 deficit is after you've adjusted the general fund to be quite a bit more aggressive. This is after you've adjusted revenues for what appraisals actually came in, yeah? And you've adjusted the collection rate or the up to 99%. So I like that, because I think that's like a true revenue estimate. So y'all knew I would like that part. But we can't then say, oh, our budget deficit's only 500,000 more than what the last budget was, because the last budget was using underestimated revenues. So once our revenues are in line, that's step one. Step two is stay within revenues. So can we delve deeper into what's the $1.4 million increase in campus and department allocations? Because I know base salaries and benefits, that's pretty much already gone. We're not going to be no savings there. So it seems like that 1.5 bump in campus and department allocations is a place where we.
Yeah, and that's what our next step is, the things that we are working on now. are the program evaluations, because we have to look at state comp ed, bilingual education, gifted and talented, special ed. We have to look at those because we have to comply with the state. So we have to make sure, so we're doing those program evaluations to make sure that we're in compliance. We have a couple campus visits, CDC and Lamar to finish. We need to do our reconciliation because we go back and we say, okay, what was added? What does this number come back up to? So when next time I come to you, I'll have that. I can tell you what exactly that is. And the end of year forecast. So those are the things budget has been moved up and we're trying to close the year. So I'm not as far along. Normally I have a whole summer to do this. So I don't have all the answers for you tonight, but this was at first glance where we are. We did meet as cabinet on Friday to kind of go through these expenses, go through what additional stuff the campuses were asking for, how we're going to take care of those needs, what we're going to need to do. So that was the first step, and we're on our second step. So the next time I come to you, I'll be able to tell you what those differences, and I'm sorry I didn't have that for you tonight.
And then the other issue I have is, while we know salaries and benefits, pay levels are fixed, we don't know that the frequency or the number of people in each department is fixed. And I believe I recall seeing an audit showing we were heavy in some departments on personnel. Are there opportunities to reduce through attrition or otherwise some of those positions to lower our base salary and benefit?
We are currently looking at that. Was part of our conversations that we were having and looking at that and making sure all the vacancies, and we're trying to move into what we call position control so we can closely monitor that and make sure that we don't have positions that are getting out there that aren't being voided or added that haven't been approved.
As an individual trustee, I'm going to be uncomfortable and have trouble supporting a budget that has a deficit larger than just unique one-time expenses like one-to-one rollout. I know that's buried in here. You know,
Yes,
I know that has a
yes.
$500,000 cost attached to it. You know, if we had a $500,000 deficit and we knew exactly what it was for, you know, maybe I could go along with that. But something approaching 2.4, I'm probably a no.
Okay, well, I will bring back the detail. This was to give you a summative and then also let you know some of the additional things that we added, and if that was a no, we would take them out. But we figured that these three initiatives that y'all would probably be fans of, so we wanted to make sure that it was okay to add these because we didn't tell you about them in the first part. So that additional 200 is in that $2 million deficit number.
Halsey?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to confirm, that 200 was inside there, so thank you for confirming that. But I'm also somewhat alarmed by the $1.4 million increase in the department allocations. Without that increase, it seems like we would be in a really sweet spot in terms of being very close to our
I'll bring those. I do not have any detail. We just started this process. So we have to reconcile, and it could be something that's in there twice, I don't know, or I could, by the time I come back, I will tell you what all those additions are.
Because I appreciate the trying to be as accurate as possible with this budget in the first place, so thank you for that. But also I'm thinking of next year and the fact that we will be opening up a new elementary school and we will have to have budget for that. So I'm interested in coming in as closely as possible to our, to the funds that are available to us. I would also be interested in seeing a number the next time on if we reduced the tax rate by 0.5 cent, what that revenue would look like.
Okay, do I update that on there? Okay, so we were looking at tax rates. I have to run the effective tax rate, but given we got our first preliminary from our financial advisor, and given that they're growing so fast, we are going to issue the second set in July. That's the second series of bonds. So we're going to issue those, and then we're going to put a bigger payment on the first year so that we don't have to do a defeasance. That will help allocate funds that we won't have to pay. It'll save us some interest. So by next year, if we continue the same, we'll be able to drop between 3 and 5 cents off the tax rate.
And so will that be a presentation in June?
Yes, yes. Until I can't give y'all an effective tax rate and let you know exactly where it's going to be until I get my numbers in July. Because remember, you have to go through.
And are we approving the budget in July or in August?
No, you're going to approve the budget in June, but we can't adopt the tax rate until August.
So the July will include the tax forecast.
Yeah, so we're
report.
just gonna have to go based
I
on,
think she's talking about the 3 to 5 cents for 2019, 2020.
yeah, so it'll be 1 year out.
Following-
1 year out.
For the following.
Right, I
year.
understand.
Ms. Costilla?
Back to this 2.4, and I know Mr. McLaughlin mentions about the issues in supporting a budget going into a 2.4 deficit, but that 2.4 does include what the increase we gave the teachers, right?
Includes all
And it
raises,
includes
yeah.
all that, and those are recurring costs, so
Yes.
that's something that whether we already approved that, and that will be coming up. I think all of us would, from myself, I would like to give people a tax break, but if we're looking at 2 to 3 years from now, having to give back to the state, it's so much easy, and it's wonderful to be able to tell taxpayers, we're going down on your tax rate, but it's quite a bit when we're gonna have to come back and say, I think we're gonna have to raise it when we're later on. So, I'm
There's-
just making
There's
reference
two
to
parts
that.
of that. There's, remember, your M&O, which is the $1.06, which is set, and then your INS. And you, right now, with given the home values, the INS, the
Yes.
5 cents will come off the INF side, not the M&O
Not
side.
M&O.
So.
We can change the M&O.
No. You cannot change the M&O rate, without going out for voter approval.
We can't reduce it without going to the voter approval?
Technically, you don't, reduce your M&O tax rate. Normally, once you set it, your M&O, unless your effective tax rate tells you that, you're over, which we are never over, for M&O. Normally, our effective tax rate is always higher than our approved tax rate, but we cannot go above the $1.06.
No, I know we can't go above it, but I'm saying the law doesn't prevent us from reducing it, does it?
Yeah, it doesn't, we could lower it.
Yeah,
Now, that might have implications
Yeah.
on our recapture.
right.
I know the
I
state
understand.
did.
Changes the formula based on what our tax rate is.
CISD changed something with regard to their taxes and get
Right.
kind of slapped back about it. I know that wasn't you, but you might have heard of it.
I'll take responsibility for everything right now.
I just want to be clear on what is and what isn't possible. That's,
Mr. Rutherford?
They've swapped.
Moving forward, and I know traditionally, Mrs. Griffith, we've seen, I guess, our budget broken down by function. But as we go into 18-19, I would really like to see it by program and initiative. Again, Mr. McLaughlin mentioned, there's a $1.4 million increase in here taken into account, the higher effective tax rate, the higher revenue, so on and so forth. But again, I don't know what that $1.4 million is. That could be, again, the one-to-one initiative, things that are approved by the board but not approved by the board because it's initiatives internally based on administrative recommendations or campus initiative or program, or it's recognizing the grant funding that we have for Gear Up or so on and so forth. But again, I don't know what that is and what that budget
I understand,
deficit
and
is.
I understand that.
And so, again, when we see these kind of large year-over-year increases in expenditures, fuel, electricity, water, those things increase and are based on kind of what the city sets those rates as. And so I can kind of take that into account. But if someone asked me, well, this department had 1.2 million last year and now they have 1.8, you approved it at a meeting in August, what was that difference? I would say, I don't know, the one pager didn't tell me what that was, I just voted on it. So moving forward, if we could see especially the difference from year to year, so if like, department had been allocated $800,000 and now in 2018-19 they're at whatever that increase is, that difference, I wanna know what that difference is and why it increased and what initiatives or programs or cost increases that's taking into account versus, we just, every year, and again, degrees of political science, public administration, government expenditures, you ask for more, and if you don't spend it, then you're probably gonna get less than next year, so, again, I'd like to see what those increases are actually for year to year.
Are some of the increases in here for preparing for the opening of the new school?
shouldn't be.
But we didn't put any for any allocations. I'll have to go back, and look what, she's saying no.
No, yeah, probably not. Not yet, until next year.
It won't be until next year that we do that.
Mhm.
Okay, for the following, for 1920.
But I will bring y'all a detail, like I did in previous years. It's just that time ran out and, we haven't had time, we have not had a chance to reconcile, but I thought it was more important tonight so that y'all could kind of see where we're at,
Looking at-
and it can only get better from here, so. Gave you the scenario and to let you know where about we are in budget, and then we'll work on it from this process, so the next time I present to you, we'll be able to, have a conversations about what those numbers include
Will that next time be at?
in June.
Be a separate workshop? Are you gonna?
It all depends on how the board wants it, if y'all want it, as part of a workshop, so we can adopt the budget, you know, on the regular scheduled board meeting, we can do that. Or if you wanna have the budget workshop at the regular scheduled meeting and then have a separate meeting to adopt the budget, we just have to adopt it before June 30th.
If
We
possible,
already have our workshop for our training, our Senate bill that we have to make for the June, right? June 4th? Yes?
if possible, I'd like to see it at the agenda prep.
At the agenda prep, like this
so
one,
that
I
we
was
can
gonna
adopt it in
suggest
the
too.
board meeting.
When things can change that way, you can get, you know, once, we haven't even seen these allocations, you know, and if we wanna reduce it or something, I think admin needs some time to
Work with it.
figure out
At
where
the
that
same
is.
time we're doing the training?
So, I don't know.
We're doing a training as well.
Well, if Mr. McLaughlin's
That's correct.
comment, or at least my perspective would be that I'd like to have two opportunities for the board to approve or adopt the budget. Again, I think there was, my first year on the board, it was, oh, this is like due at midnight tonight, so you have to vote on it and you have to approve it, cause it's the deadline. And, I think that was a weird timeline of events, so if, you know, the board sees some issues or concerns or some comments are made, then whatever that calendar is, I'd like us to have an opportunity to either delay approving the budget to a later date that still makes us in compliance with the deadline to approve.
The regular scheduled board meeting is on the 18th. You could do it the 4th, then you have the 11th, the 18th, and the 25th. Has to be done before when, June 30th?
I mean, if it could be scheduled for the 18th and then that agenda prep immediately preceding the 18th board meeting, so if that agenda prep isn't kosher for some of us, then they can go into.
That's the
the board
3-hour
meeting.
board
That's the team
training.
building.
It's a training that we agreed on.
That you're getting,
That's the
That's
fourth,
Yeah,
right?
Bring a sleeping bag then.
come at 2?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be here. I mean, I don't have to be here for this.
Correct.
Obviously, there's 7 of us.
Board training you have.
No, I get to make it up at Summer Learning. I already had.
SLI has the,
We call,
They called.
Legislative update.
I
This
already-
is just legislative update, this isn't team abate.
I already had a
It is.
we're
flight.
getting credit for team.
Oh, it's, okay, so we're sneaking in team abate.
But we don't get
it's
team
not.
evade if everybody's not here.
No, I checked with a
You don't
warrant.
have to move it.
What happens if we
Wait,
don't
what?
get team abate training? Do they like remove us? I doubt it, but.
So this is a legislative
So
update on
we're
getting
what?
getting
Let-
team abate
wait.
training, but I
Agenda
think
prep
it's
and that
overhyped.
3-hour training.
But this is a legislative update on what legislation?
On that Senate bill.
1566. It's gotta be done before September 1st.
Senate Bill 6, which one?
but we've already got it scheduled.
More
We've got a
unfunded
speaker.
mandates, less money from the state. There's the legislative.
Sorry, I had one more question. Where did the extra $20,000 for the bottom pre-K program come from?
On what?
On the 2008, 2019 proposed budget, there's $20,000 allocated pre-K supplemental funding.
The weighted formula.
Oh, I believe those were, that supplement, that $50,000, I think that was for,
No, the $20,000 pre-K supplemental funding that looks like it's coming from the state, where it was 0 last year and now it's projected at 20,000 for next year. I thought that the state had removed all that funding.
Here, right here.
Oh,
I'm just curious what that is.
So we figured out what we're gonna do.
pre-K supplemental.
Budget workshop?
Section,
If you could just let me know, if you don't know tonight, that's fine.
no,
but-
she's saying we get a supplement from the state. That's why it's under state funding. We get a supplement from the state.
Right, but I want to know under what program of the state? Like, I thought that the state had put forward that one fund where we had to apply for it, we got the grants, and then they removed it in the last legislative session. So I'm wondering where this is suddenly coming from, why we didn't have it last year, and now we'll have it next year.
okay.
We'll look into
That's
that
not,
one.
I didn't realize it
Yeah,
was.
I think,
We
Let
okay.
me
did do
pull my
the
calendar out. Kathy, I'll pull the calendar out.
I'd like
No.
us to decide tonight.
I'll give you an answer for that. I'll
That's
look
fine,
it
I
up
just
and-
wonder where it's,
That we may
what
have got
state
it.
allocation is-
We may have got it, last year, and I didn't budget for it, because this is
well, I
budget.
thought the state eliminated all of it, so that was my understanding, so.
So I could have eliminated from budget, and we actually
Talking about
got
the
some, so I will,
20,000
I'll look
additional
into that.
coming for pre-K.
Griffith, when is the deadline to approve the budget?
Well, I mean, you would technically want to do it before June 30th so that in July they could spend money and they can do payroll. But I mean, that's
So
why.
June 30th.
June
We-
30th.
30th, yes.
We have June 25th already scheduled as an agenda prep already because of July.
For July.
So it was moved. You could,
So first reading or first possible vote could be the 18th, and if for whatever reason it's not approved on the 18th at the regular board meeting, it could be the 25th.
Right now, we have one on the 4th.
So we need the budget workshop
And-
before we approve.
And that approving by June 30th is our own internal rule. That's not a law.
No.
But they can't spend money in
Right.
July.
It holds them
July.
back.
Approve budget.
Okay, we've got the 18th and we've got the
I'm just trying to
25th.
like mind map backwards from deadline to when our budget workshop can be. But I'm trying to give opportunity for 2 readings of the approval of the budget after the budget workshop, just in case.
And the 2 readings don't have to be 30 days apart. They can be one
No,
week
it's
apart.
just- I just said it like that, but.
Good workshop, but now we need to plan for June. Anybody?
I'm here.
you're out to the 2nd through the
Yeah, I'm on
9th.
the 2nd through the 9th, but I'm otherwise here all month. Oh, I'll go into that summer learning Thursday to make up what I miss with you guys.
SLI starts the 13th through the
Mhm.
16th.
And it's that first night. I think it's on the 13th, that
Yes,
Senate bill,
Thursday.
Senate bill training. Because right now I've got down for a meeting on the 4th, on the 18th, and the 25th. So what's y'all's pleasure?
So on the 4th, are we including a budget workshop or not?
We need a budget workshop date.
So, but the 4th only entails training, is that what I'm hearing?
On the 4th, we've got agenda prep and our training.
It's like a
Our Senate
3-hour.
Bill 15,
At
16.
least 4 hours.
I'd prefer to do the training on the 11th.
I can't come on the 11th.
I can't be
I
here
could
on
come
the
on the
11th.
12th, but I can't come on the 11th.
I will not be
No, we didn't have anything
on
set, we don't have
Thursday.
anything set for the 11th at this point.
Right.
I've got a root canal, but that's it.
That whole week.
Move it
But
again.
My husband is teaching on Monday.
So we could have the budget
18th.
workshop being requested on June the 4th. No, just kidding.
No.
Just kidding.
No,
That's that long meeting, okay.
Yep.
We could have the budget workshop on the 18th. And then a
18th.
special call meeting on the 25th to approve it. That
18th.
is-
We're,
Yeah,
18th is our regular board meeting.
I'm just.
The
throwing
12th is
stuff out
also
there.
fine. I'm fine with the 12th.
Can we do it on
You're-
June 12th?
Can everybody do the 12th? Look at your calendar.
What day is that? I
Tuesday.
believe?
That's a Tuesday.
Tuesday.
The week before your birthday.
Don't remind anybody, especially in my age, about
I'll be
upcoming
out of town that
birthdays.
Tuesday. I'll be at a conference,
Those are long gone.
not school district related. Just-
I'm gonna tweet.
So,
I'll be
do we
tweeting there.
have
I'll be-
at
it's a school
least
safety
5
conference.
people that are interested on the 12th? One?
I can do the 12th.
You can do the 12th?
On the
I can do
12th?
the 12th. You can do the,
I can do the 12th.
I think. McLaughlin, you can do the 12th?
Now, are we
Yes.
talking
Back?
about a
Yes.
budget workshop? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
Talking about a budget workshop.
What time?
5.
5 is good.
I'll work with the technology department so I can Skype in.
You can,
Don't get left out.
you can.
Okay, budget workshop.
I know Ann tried to be the first one to do that, but,
She was early adopter, it didn't work.
she tried.
Yeah, she tried. They couldn't
Here,
facilitate it.
do you
It
want
got
to
dropped.
here or central office?
Here.
Here?
And district.
Yeah. that's-
12, okay.
June 12th.
Do you want to have agenda prep at this time or keep agenda prep on the 4th?
We have to
We
keep
have
it on the
training
4th because we've
already
got
on
a
the 4th.
3-hour training already.
TASB.
And we're, on the 12th, we're meeting at 5?
Just for budget workshop, right?
Just budget.
Budget workshop.
With the idea that we might adopt on the 18th. Is that right?
Yes.
We still have that next week. Yeah, that'll keep us moving.
Pretty quick month of June.
I want to thank you for your information that you've provided for us. I know it's not complete, but thank you for all the work you've done. And I know you said 15 minutes, but it didn't go 15 minutes.
Always the optimist. Do we need a motion to
We need a
adjourn?
motion?
Yes,
I move-
that we adjourn.
Oh,
Second from Halsey. All in favor? All approved, 7-0.
We